And we're live. What's going on, everybody? Hope everybody's having a good week. It's Saturday. The weekend is here. Everybody a chance to stagger on here and visit with us a while. Let me get these links out here in the meantime. Let's see. This is the part I hate the most having to do this. I think a lot of times at the very beginning of the podcast is probably one of the worst times because a lot of people are watching and they see the very beginning, they see me sitting there quiet sharing links, and they're like, well, hell, this is boring. they don't watch the rest of it. So maybe I'll try to engage the chat while I'm also sharing links. Hope everybody's having a good week. So the big news today is we are changing days. We're going to be here on Saturday and Tuesday instead of Saturday and Wednesday. So mark your calendars and make note of that. So it'll be Saturday and Tuesdays instead of hump days and Saturdays. Trying to set up a schedule. I guess on the schedule on the militia page didn't show me in for Tuesdays, but we'll be doing Tuesdays and Saturdays. So give me a chance to get these links out there. About 34 here. What's where everybody else is, man? I'm already about tired of cold weather, and we ain't even halfway into December yet, man. Jeez. I think old Marky Mark's live right now, so I'll wait and share to his page a little bit later. I was on there before I jumped on here. Or watching. I wasn't on there. I was watching. What's going on, Curtis? What's up, JJ? What's up, Moonshine John? Hell yeah, man. Love making that moonshine. Whatever kind we make it. What's going on up here in BC, Canada, David? Hello from Southeast Missouri. That's a good spot to be, man. Missouri is one of the few states that allow it to be legally done, up to 100 gallons per person, up to 2 people per household. Over 21 that could do it. Pretty good rules. You know, we were talking about that last week and what different states have different rules and stuff. I know West Virginia started out with something, at least they legalized, and they're taking steps to make it legal. And that's one of the, what our big push is. It should be, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. I think we can make beer, wine. We should be able to make a little whiskey if we want to. But at least West Virginia got it in, but I think they voted in is like a gallon. I think somebody finally up and said, you know, a gallon comes out like a little teeny steel about the size of a coffee pot. Man, we need to up that a little bit. Well, coffee pots is, I don't know, some of them coffee pots are pretty big. But what's going on, Clint? Good to see you, brother. I'm cold, John. I hope this heater warms up pretty well. I'm down in the basement. It stays usually pretty cool down here, but man, it's cold right now. 34 here, Roger. We're cold. Hell yeah, it's time to rock and roll. Do some shine. We'll talk about some moonshine. Let me get these links put out there. I want to kind of engage before I do that because I think a lot of people are, at the beginning, they see me just sitting here sharing links. And I should be talking the whole time I'm doing it, because I can chew gum and walk at the same time, contrary to popular belief. So I should be able to just kind of talk with everybody while I'm sharing the links. But my Apple is done. It's been ready for a little while now, so I need to get that running out of the way so I can bring in some other stuff. I've got some blueberry ready and some apple ready. So, or I'm sorry, blackberry, not blueberry, blackberry. Well, I think one of them is actually it's a blueberry blackberry combo, and the other two are blackberry. It's wine. So we're going to try to sweeten it up a little bit and see how those taste, and if those come out pretty good, they're going to remain a wine. But if they don't come out real good, they go in the pot. That's the way it works. It's fine enough to go in the bottle as a wine. We'll definitely put her there. But if it has a little bit off flavors or something that's just not perfect, she goes into the pot. So I give them a chance. I make my brandies. I make them to make wine. So that's my for most of my brandies. There's been a few like this apple that I intended to distill from the very get go. So it's now not. There was never a doubt that it's going to be an apple wine. I was going to do apple rye, but it started off a little slow. I think my EC 1118 was a little dated, and it just wasn't taking off like I expected. Checked all my other, we checked the pH, we checked the temperature, we checked all our, different uh, variables, and pretty much the only thing that was left was the yeast. And I did a little starter, and I should have noticed it didn't foam up a whole lot given the yeast that I put in that jar. So I probably should have known from the very get go. That's the whole purpose that we do that. And I dropped the ball. That's all I can say about that. And so we tried a little daty in there, which I usually don't use with fruits, but I just decided it was on top. It was there, and I knew I was going to distill it anyway. So I figured, let's see what this tastes like, because usually I'll use a wine yeast. I forgot some Premier Blanc. I should have just used that, but it hadn't been opened yet. It's brand new. It hadn't been opened yet. And I had this daty sitting there. It's been there a while, so I figured, well, I'll throw a little bit of this in there and see if she takes off. Now I'm not able to see y'all chatting, so if you comment right now, I'm not able to see your comments until I get these links out. But so I put some daty in there, man. That shit, boom, it took right off. So I've got some EC 1118 I need to get through, and you just have to use more when it starts getting ineffective like that. And so we'll just put some more yeast in next time and go ahead and use that up. But I do need to make a note that I need to get some more of that, because I like the EC 1118 on certain things. I normally would have, with apple, would have used a wine yeast, but I knew I was going to distill it, so I just decided to do the EC 1118. I usually would use that Red Star Premier Blanc, which is what I usually use on my light colored fruits, and so that's basically what they're designed for. That yeast is designed specifically for lighter colored yeast or lighter colored fruits, for wine and champagne. So for your apples, your white grapes, your peaches, all your light colored fruits, it's kind of geared towards that, and it gives you really good flavor notes for that. It's what I use in my grappa as well. It's really good stuff. And they also make a Premier Rouge, which is a kind of a red wine for dark red fruits and dark fruits. And I use that in a lot of my plums and dark grapes and darker colored fruits, and that works real well. So they're kind of geared towards that, and it's good to look online. When you're thinking about using different yeast or trying different yeast out, check online, because like Lalvin and Red Star both, and even we found out a couple of weeks ago after some people were asking about the yellow label on the militia page. I haven't really, I've got the yellow label, but somebody wasn't sure if they had the right one, and it wasn't the right one. But it's perked my interest a little bit. So I'm like, well, let's go check out this Yellow Label page and see what they got. This angel yeast and see what they got going on there. So I never really had spent much time looking at what they had, and sure enough, I go there, man, and man, they got all kinds of stuff there. They got they got a pretty big variety of yeast, and I was amazed at how many they had. There was quite a bit. So need to go to that website too, I guess, and check them out if you're using the Yellow Label. It's something kind of, or the angel yeast. Now the Yellow Label is for, of course, conversions without amylase. So it's got the goji yeast or the goji fungus in it, and that helps do the conversions. Pretty interesting stuff. So definitely a little bit different, but something everybody should try out for sure. So anyway, go to the website and check, because they've got some, like I said, they've got some wines or yeast that are designed for specific things, like meat. They have some that D47, and that's kind of geared towards meads and ciders, and it's pretty daggone good for that. So a lot of these companies make these things, and so when you do when you choose like your which yeast you're going to use, um, it, it's a good idea to check these things out, because uh, we all know that all yeast aren't the same, and nothing kills me more than somebody, all them yeast, they're all the same. It's like, man, that's I mean, there's a lot of opinions in this, and a lot of people have a lot of varying opinions in this, but that's not one of them. It's yeah, there's a lot of different yeasts that are specifically geared. Now it does boil down to whatever flavor you like. So if you enjoy using Deity yeast for every single thing you do, that's fine. Or EC 1118. Probably if you're just going to pick one, EC 1118 maybe. Yeah, Philly's out of Dayton. EC 1118 may be the best one that you got going. All right, let's see. I missed a bunch here. 43. Time to rock and roll. This 160 proof. Damn, bro. Proof that down some, man. I want you to stick with us longer. That shit'll eat your liver up. I don't know. I sip some high proof, 145, 50. I tell you, I drank some pure grain when I was a young kid. Somebody, here, take a shot of this. They didn't tell me it's pure grain, and 190 proof pure grain. Here they sell the full. Something else I didn't know is different states will only sell certain high proof, and so pure grain alcohol isn't the same proof everywhere you go. I didn't know that. I thought everybody had 190 proof pure grain, but they don't. It's some places. I think like Ohio has a maximum. I think maybe 160 might be the max that you can get in Ohio. But that's man. I took a drink of that 190 proof, and man, it starved my whole mouth and throat of all the moisture in the skin. It parched my skin. Oh man, it hurt. It wasn't good for me. But that's some pretty high proof stuff, that's for sure, brother. Get a little rain down there. Yeah, it's been pretty damn cold here. Today was a little heat wave. We got up into the mid to upper 30s. Yeah, I appreciate you, John. So we're going to move to Tuesdays and Saturdays for those that haven't heard. I guess Wednesdays, Roger and Jeremy's show, they're going to do theirs on Wednesdays. And so we're going to move our Wednesday to Tuesday, and we're going to do the Saturday thing. So I don't know. It gives me a little more of a break, I guess. Uh, it's about the same. So I hope everybody can plan around that. But yeah, it'll be fine. Tuesday, let's see, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. So there's a couple of days there, and then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So there's like 3 days there. So yeah, it'll be all right. Yeah, it'd be 3 days on one end, and it's the same. The other way it was 2 days, 3 days. So it all works out in the wash. I mean, we just have to adjust our little schedules a little differently, but it's all the same. And thing about it is, most people don't watch it live anyway. Any of them, the majority of people, I've got the little analytics. It shows when everybody watches and how long they watch, and how long each person views, and how many if they come back and watch it again. It gives you all these little stats. It doesn't say who, but it gives you all these little stats and stuff. And most people don't watch it live. I'd like to encourage more live viewers. If you have questions, especially, but I think a lot of people just depend on the people that are watching it to ask questions that they have, so they can hear their answers without having to get on here and ask it. But we do now in the Facebook has now made it to where you can use a nickname and you can be more anonymous. So if you want to join, and I selected that in the DIY Shine and Steel Building page. So if you want to come in there with a nickname and not have people know who you are, the only person that will know is me and Eric. That's the admins in there. So, and Eric's kind of doing his blacksmithing, and he spends a little time in there, I guess. He pokes in there once in a while. Great guy. If y'all don't know him, he's an awesome guy. He got into it a lot earlier, but he's gotten into blacksmithing lately, and that's kind of taken up a little bit of his time. But he's a really good guy, and does quite a bit. They used to call him the scientist. He did quite a bit of experimentation with, you know, home-sized continuous steels and things like that. So he and I collaborated and did quite a few things back in the day. But been around 3 years, I guess, was our anniversary just the other day on the page. It popped up 3 years. We've been there for 3 years, so we've been around a little while on that page and having a good time. So if you can get on there, do. We got quite a few people there. We're going to start posting. We talked earlier, I guess Wednesday, we were talking about uh, recipes and stuff, and I spent a little bit of time going through, but there's so many recipes I've got that are just shit recipes. To be just quite honest with you, I don't know where the hell they came from or who put them on there, but I'm trying. I don't want to post anything that's not that I wouldn't want to try or do myself. I don't want to put it just a. I can throw thousands, literally thousands at you, but I don't want to put junk out there, right? So I'll have to go through each one. I'm going to look through now. I'm not going to say I've tried each one. I'm just going to say that based on what I saw, it looks like it'd probably be okay, and that's about the criteria I can do. I can't, of course, try them all out. But if something says, 3 pounds of sugar per gallon and all this, folks immediately throw that shit out, because it's not going to be legit. But and a lot of them um, have been taken from other places and copied and pasted and new names put on it and all that. That happens a lot. So we try to look out for that. I do have the Stampede Steel recipe book in there that has a lot of proven recipes. And they kind of did the same thing. They went through a lot of different recipes and put some decent ones together. Um, I'm glad you made it too, Pat. So and it's a decent little. It's not the most comprehensive. It's not. You need to do this. It's not necessarily designed for the beginners, but it's some decent, recipes in there that are basically how much of each ingredient, so that works pretty well. It doesn't break it all down and tell you how to do it like I want to do, but just regular general recipes, and they do pretty well. Awesome. Yeah, so you cold crashed it, huh? Yeah, that works pretty well, man. Cold crashing it'll help those particulates, man. They'll drop right out on you, man. It does a lot, and a lot of people call it, after you distill it, you can put it out in the cold and call it cold filtering, so you can get some oils out of it if you want to really get it really cold and get some of the oils out of your distillate. That works too. But a lot of people don't like that. It does have a different taste. And you can look on your bottles whether it's cold filtered or not. And some people are fond of it. Some people, not so fond. It's I'm one of those tend not to be so fond of it because some of those oils that it takes out are pretty essential, especially in aging. Uh, Brandy is bad wine. Wine is bad fruit. I like the logic and the thought behind that. That's exactly right, man. I mean, wine is usually made with the fruit that just not pretty enough to put on the sand, and uh, and brandy's made with the wine that ain't fit really to drink or not the best of wines. I know that's my criteria for it. It starts out as a wine, and if it ain't great, then it's hitting the pot. What's going on, Scott? Good to see you with us, brother. Yeah, I got all my little elves in there working, man. They working overtime. What's up, Lawrence? Good to see you, brother. Yeah, man. 71B. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, and it boils down to taste. Now, I will say for EC 1118, it's really good for like if you have a stuck fermentation, and it's fresh. This I've got. It's got a little age on it. Even though I keep it in the fridge, I hate to say it, but it's been there a while because I've got like 5 or 6. Well, let's see. We got about 7 or 8 different yeast. So used to EC 1118 didn't last long because I was using it for a lot of stuff. But now I've using a lot of different yeast for a lot of different things, and so it had a little time to get some age on it. But yeah, EC 1118, like if you just had one yeast to use, that would probably be one of your better choices, for everything. If you just wanted to buy one, but fortunately, we can get a bunch of different wine yeasts for different wines and shines and distillates and kind of gear them towards what we like, and it's good to try a lot of different ones. Uh, if you're able to and you want to experiment between wines, just split your mash up in two before you put the yeast on it and try a couple of different ones to see which works best. Uh, that's kind of how I arrived at some of mine. But yeah, few Billy's out of date. Do they? I've not really ventured out. I've used the Lalvin, the Red Star. I've got some from Firm Solutions, and then the Angel, and the Deity, which is a Red Star. But from Firm Solutions, Red Star, Lalvin, and Angel, or and Fleischmann's, of course. I used Fleischmann's for decades. Bread yeast was all we could get for a long, long time. So I'm really happy to be able to use a lot of different yeasts and stuff. So I'm like a kid in a candy store once Amazon came along and all this and all of a sudden the whole world opened up. Man, you could get all kinds of gear and a lot of things that weren't available before the internet. It's changed a lot and pretty much every industry and everybody's lives. It's had a big impact on a lot of stuff. Interesting. M05. Now, is that the mangrove jack you're talking about? I'm assuming. What's going on, Jonathan? Youngster. Oh, man. If you call me young, you must be Methuselah, brother. What's up, Redneck? Good to see you, brother. Yeah, and ale yeast. We were talking about this last week, I guess Wednesday, and it's also great for when the temps start getting a little colder. Some of these ale yeast, and they work a little better in colder temps. They don't. It's I don't know. It's hard for me to comment on it. I was doing it on Facebook at first, and I wasn't able to see, and then they posted something Clint had said, and I was on Facebook, so I opened it up in StreamYard just so I could see the comments and sat in the backstage, and then I guess once Chad dropped off there and Prohibition was my buddy Pro was having trouble getting on and off there with his internet, and so everybody's jumping on there, and I'm like, well, hell, I'll jump on there too. I'm sitting there watching it so I can see some of the YouTube comments and addressing. Yeah, I guess sometimes it's more about I guess sometimes it's the show's geared more towards kind of a talk show thing where they just do the talking and everybody just watches, and maybe a little less comment oriented, I should say. But here it's all about questions and answers, and it's all about what y'all have to say, and dealing with everybody here, and engaging the people in the chat, and trying to get information out, because we do know that there's so many people that, and I mean, when I say many, I've mentioned this 1,000 times, I'm trying to get more people on here live, because I'd like for a lot of these people that are watching later, and I guess I know that on Saturdays especially, they're out doing, they got better things to do, sit talk to old Santa, but trying to engage more, because like maybe 7% of the viewers watch it live, maybe less. So yeah, there's so many people that watch it during the week and during the day, on I guess on lunch breaks and on their way to work in the mornings and stuff. So you know, uh, I'd like to encourage them to get on live if they can. I guess it fits. A lot of them. Hopefully get a lot of their questions answered and just enjoy listening to us talk, and hopefully someday they'll make it in here. Well, like we had earlier, somebody finally caught them a live show, and I'm already behind. So let me quit talking. I'm 15 minutes behind already. So I will say, if you make a comment and I don't get to you immediately, don't get mad at me now, because I get long winded, in case you haven't noticed. And when I get to talking about things, I try to get what I need to say out there. And sometimes yeah, Firm Solutions has some really good yeast. They probably have one of the largest yeast collections in the world too. A lot of people don't realize that, but not just what they sell. They've got a lot of strains. They're like the seed bank of yeast. I mean, they've got thousands and thousands and thousands that most people don't even know that. But yeah, they've got a lot, and they can DNA. They can test them, and they do a lot of DNA sequencing and stuff. So child mashing, yeah, it's cold stuff, ain't it? Yeah, it's I'm gonna try it. I got some to try. I haven't been able to, but they call it cold mashing. By God, by the time I get to use it, it's gonna be literally cold mashing. So it's not gonna get fermented, or it's not gonna get converted. It's gonna be a little bit on the lower temperature side too. I have to put this heater in there between them all, but it'll work. But glad to have everybody on here, and uh, well, like on the shit show, it's just basically everybody gets on there and chats, and engages the chat a little bit. But I think they were having a lot of technical difficulties, so they were trying to sort through a lot of that and get a lot of that taken care of. And then once they got that sorted out, and got me and Damon off there, I guess they got to talking about other things. It's good to see old Prohibition on there. I hated seeing his grandpa pass, man. I really enjoyed watching his grandpa's video. And of course, the 5th was the day of prohibition, which is one of the reasons they had him on. And if y'all don't know him, he's a good guy. He's a great guy. For those that don't know him, check him out on YouTube and all the popular spots, and give him a follow and check him out. He's got a lot going on, man. But I hated seeing his grandpa pass, man. But I guess they were talking about it last night. Is a good, couple of years for his grandpa. They got to spend some time together and do some distilling together. And he didn't realize how viral his he was going. His grandpa didn't. And Pro was like, "Yeah, man, we got hundreds of thousands of views." And they're like, "Wow, really?" So YouTube's got a pretty big reach, and it's amazing how many people. And those short videos seem to get the most people. A lot of these long videos, a lot of people, they don't watch the 2-hour shows, or 3-hour shows. They like that 3-5 minute engagement thing. That's the attention span. That's about all they watch. Yeah, I was thinking it's 160 proof was the max there. Yeah. Actually, I think I broke the law there a few years ago when I took some, well, in more ways than one, I took some peach up there. It was, I think, about 160, 65 before I proofed it down. It was a little higher proof than I wanted it to be, but it wasn't bad. It just didn't have a lot of peach, and of course that proof, it's kind of. I ran it like the week before the competition, and I'm learning my lesson. I guess apples the competition for next year, and this apple I'm doing right now will probably be the apple for next year. It's going to age, and yeah, we'll see how it turns out. Should be pretty good. Yeah, I knew what you meant, brother. Yeah, we all make those from time to time. Let me get this out of the way there. Now I can see more comments. Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. And yeah, if you got a copper still, I highly recommend you pouring it back into a fermenter or something like that, because you definitely don't want to leave that acidic, back set in your copper, because it'll definitely turn her green on you, because it's pretty acidic. So yeah, it'll be fine. Yeah, absolutely. That low at that high acidity level, that helps keep a lot of bacteria out. And as cold as it is and acidic, those are two things working in your favor. So definitely cold and acidic helps keep the bacteria and a lot of that stuff down. So you'll definitely be fine. But the fact that it's got alcohol in it as well, yeah, you'd be all right. Because I've had people that have had corn mashes uh, sit in a fermenter for a year. They kind of forgot about it and went back there. Oh hell, I forgot I had that barrel full back there. That 50-gallon barrels full of corn mash, and they run it anyway. And some say it's some of the best they've had. So yeah, it should be fine. What's going on, Mr. Shadow? And happy birthday, Mr. Morgan. I guess it's yesterday, or yeah, yesterday was his birthday. Happy birthday, brother. And Nick Kalo. Happy birthday, Nick. Hope y'all had a good one. Happy birthday, brother Mark. Which reminds me, let's see. Let's see if old Marky Mark's done with his. He is, so I can go ahead and paste on post onto his page. I'll wait for him to finish his podcast. I'm not going to post. I'll be damned, but Facebook's going to tell me whether I can or not, though. I have to wait another half hour before I can post that there. Let me go ahead and put it like this so I can come back to it, though. Yeah, I'm not going to post something on somebody's page where they got another one going. That ain't right. Don't do that. That's rude. I knew what you meant, Clint. Cold child, yeah, I knew. Clint's doing this on his damn phone, so I type on these damn phones and I double strike. I hit two keys at once. Well, my worst is the L and K. So every wood could is wookle and cookle. I don't know. I always get that L and the K mixed up, and I got fat fingers, and that damn phone keyboard definitely ain't made for a man's fingers. And Pat, glad you made it with us, brother. I saw earlier that you posted that over here on the screen, and I dressed up and I seen it on there. But let me get caught up. Good to have you with us. So that's one of those ones that listened before and wasn't able to get here on live. And man, he's on his work day. That's awesome. He's usually working about this time. So we got quite a few viewers though. I would say 97% of the viewers and views are live. I'd like to have them on here all live. And I don't know though, Lord, Clint, you think we can keep up with 400 or 500 on here all at the same time? I don't know, and it might get tough. What's going on, Roy? Good to see you, brother. We're glad to have you here, Pat. If you got any questions, brother, be sure to ask, or if you got something going on, or let us know if you have some success. If you got something turned out well, let us share it with us. If you got some questions, bring them on, brother. That's what we're here for. But nobody said shots yet, damn it, unless I hadn't scroll down to it. So I'm gonna have to break protocol and call it myself. I need a drink. I haven't had one today. This Saturday. Cheers, y'all. It's 745 proof, man. I'm getting a little rusty. But that's good stuff. Man, that's white lightning. Somebody posted that on the militia page. I haven't heard that song in a long time. Here we go. Can I use 3 pounds of corn per gallon on a 25-gallon drum and get more of the corn flavor, or 2.5, use cracked corn and I mill it down more? Yeah, 3 gets a little bit hard to manage, but we were talking about that Wednesday. If you want, you can add a little bit of amylase, and I guess most of these amylase I wasn't aware of it called to add the amylase before you gelatinize, which for me is a little bit. I prefer to gelatinize first, but to make it more manageable, because it gets a little bit thick at 3, and so to make it more manageable, if you want to add a little, maybe half your amylase, high temp alpha, what I'm talking about. So if you want to add half of that early on and keep it manageable, that would be a really good idea when you start getting up into, over 2.25, 2.5 to 3, add a little bit of that amylase early on, like a lot of people do. I wasn't aware that a lot of people were doing that. And I tend to prefer, I've always gelatinized my corn and cooked it and gelatinized it, and then add the amylase at 155, as the powdered stuff, because that's what that's for that high temp liquid came out. That's all we had, or you'd use the malted grains at a cooler temperature, right, at 150, 45. So we let her cool down. So I'm not really used to adding the amylase, right off the bat like that. And I kind of still like watching my corn gelatinize up, so I know that it's fully cooked and then it's good. But yeah, if you're doing 3 pounds, it's not, there's nothing wrong with that. You'll get a little higher gravity. You'll get a little bit more starch conversion and sugars out of it. Going to be thicker and a little harder to manage, but maybe add a little bit of that alpha, high temp alpha early, and it'll make it a little easier for you to manage. And I'm sure Clint's probably already told you that by now. Processing deer meat. All right, love to hear there's a success story. Love to hear it. So is this something you do for a living down there, or is this you processing your own, or maybe both? Yeah, I've done both. I tend to I've cut up my own a few times, and I tend to, if I can, I tend to let the pros do it because I like two things. I like the way they do the sausage better than mine, and I like for them to plug some of my roasts. They plug them with pork and beef fat, and I like getting them plugged like that. So if you can, take it to the processors. Unless you do all that yourself, a DIY processor, but their sausage, is better than mine. I can do the burger fine, and I can cut steaks fine and do roast fine, but I'm not the best at plugging. I've got the little injector thing. I guess I can put some, you know, pork that's rendered, pork fat that's, rendered, and let it, coagulate after I get it, syringed in there. I got one of the big meat syringes now. But the way they plug it, man, they just go ahead and just take out a section and fill it with fat, and yeah, I like the way they do it better for the money and getting it all packaged up, and yeah, it's worth every penny. Yeah, I like getting my corn. I used to get the crack, and because I tore up a lot of blenders and a lot of food processors, and pissed the old lady off many times about dulling her blades and running her blenders and shit and her food processors. So I started just getting the crack and kind of making it a little finer crack if it wasn't cracked well enough. And so now I got me a grain mill, man, and I kicked myself for not getting that earlier. If I hope y'all got a good Black Friday deal on it. There may be some still out there deals, but a few years ago, a couple few years, it's some 3 years now, I got a grain meal on Black Friday, man, and oh, it's so much nicer. It's the best. I got this one. It was around the 240, 260. I seen different prices, different places, and it was the same wattage and same one, and it was like $160. So I got almost $100 off on it, about 40% off, and I pulled the trigger, and man, I'm so glad I did. Yeah, like he's saying, is if you use the, I know you'd already commented and said it. Yeah, if you don't want to use all of it, and you want to see it, gelatinize a little bit, using half up front. Definitely when you do over 2.5 or over, I'd recommend using some of that amylase right off the bat, which is sometimes what they call for, and for good reason. Let's go on, Mike. Let's see, brother. What's up, Mr. Carpenter? How things up here in the Great White North? Does it stall on you? Well, it's kind of strange because it's always been touted as one of the ones that's best for stuck fermentations, and I've had pretty good luck with it. But this one I've got is, I buy the big 500-gram ones, and instead of the little packets. I don't do the packets. I haven't done them in a long time, but um, this one had a little time to get some age on it. Most of the ones in the past got used up, and I never had any issue with them. But this one, where I started buying a lot of different yeasts, because I pretty much used a lot of EC 1118 and some Red Star Deity. Was Mac 2 when I first started. That was the one everybody, oh, you got to use that EC 1118 for your brandies and stuff. That's best. And Deity for your grains is what, I was reading everywhere. And I went from Fleischmann's to basically Deity. But, about 10 years ago, I started doing more, getting into wines and wine making and stuff. And everybody said EC 1118. So I started out with that. And then I started trying some different things that other places recommended. I first started out learning about wine making just at shine places, right? And then I started looking for recipes, and that's what kind of led me to some of these wine sites. And it was and then I got hooked up with a local, vintner, and and started going to some of the sites he recommended and learn a little bit more about it and learn a little bit more about yeast and some of the yeast that they used. And so I started branching out and reading more about it and going to a lot of wine sites for recipes and stuff and learning more about wine making. But I will say, if you want to learn how to make brandy, go to go to a wine, and learn from the wine sites. Don't go to the shine sites and find it. No offense to the shine sites, but they're not really geared towards making fine wines. And if you want to make a fine wine, most shine sites are about grains, right? So you can learn more about grains there or beer. I recommend going to a lot of beer places. John's a big beer maker, man, and probably knows about as much about beer making as most of us here. Been doing it a long time, and so, you want to learn about making whiskey and stuff, learn to make the beer, and learn how to, how they work with grains and manipulate grains and step mashing. There's a lot to be learned from beer makers. A lot different, process than what we do because we start with corn at a high temp and work down, right, backwards. Whereas beer makers start low and increase the temperatures and do, protein rests, escarification rests, and things like this that cut down on haze and proteins and stuff, formulation. And so it's a little different process. And some of your best whiskey makers are good beer makers, because they've learned that process. Just like some of your best brandy makers are going to be your vintners that know how to make the killer wine. So, you know, there's a lot to be said for, where you get your info and experimentation and learning and experimenting on different yeast, and seeing what you like best. Because, nobody can tell you what yeast you're going to prefer most. So we can make suggestions, try this one, try that one. There's so many out there, but nobody, is going to be able to say, this is what you're going to like best because only you can do that. So there's a lot of opinions and then there's a lot of facts. So, when we teach stuff, I try to keep it, straight. This is an opinion. This isn't a fact. There's some scientific facts to what we do, and we try to teach those, and try to make things safe. That's the big issue is keeping it safe. So when it comes to safety and talking about grinding up cherry pits and stuff that's got cyanide in it, I'm going to put a full stop to anybody that says that'll be okay, because it's not. So don't. And so there's certain things, and people saying you still won't explode. You can't explode a steel. That's just stupid, and that's just encouraging people to be negligent around them. When it's been in the news, we've seen it. We've seen it on MythBusters. I've got friends, that's had it happen. So, all this steels never explode. That's just a myth. No, it's not. It's a fact. It can, and it's just for people to say that, it gets me fired up because it's just blatantly wrong. And to say that, people hear that and they're like, well, see, I told you we don't have nothing to worry about, man. Just put that high proof stuff in there. You won't have to worry. They're all full of shit. They don't know. And then, next thing happens, it's you got people going to the burn center, and struggling for their lives with X amount percent of their body, burnt. It's not good, It's happened a lot. Weird question. Awesome. It's probably been asked already, damn it. Chestnut oak. That is fail. That's okay. I used to. Now chestnut. I think what he was talking about was the original chestnut. So back in the old days, before the blight and all that, and I mean old days like 1800s and prior, they used to, in the early 1900s, I guess, but they used to use chestnut a lot in the barrels and stuff. A lot of your finer wines and stuff were used, and especially wine and brandies were aged in French oak, and this, of course, was the old world. But over there, they put a lot of stuff in chestnut, and a lot of stuff over here early on was done in chestnut. And then after the blight, they had to find other types of wood that was very conducive to aging and the aging process. And so they went with oak, and they found that white oak is the best. Now, red oak is fine to use, but some people, like me, I'm one of them. You notice my face, even when I drink this regularly, my face will start getting red. But if I drink stuff that's been on red oak, I mean I get splotches, just big time rashes and stuff. And there's a lot of fair skinned people and Scandinavian people that also have this issue. And it's there's I guess allergies to the tannins and stuff that are in red oak, maple too. So that I guess when they've started deciding what wood would be best, I think white oak won out because it basically gave the best flavor, and people didn't have reactions. So that's why you don't see a lot of red oak being used in a lot of whiskey and wine barrels. Not saying you can't, but it is important though when you start dealing with woods and stuff, because a lot of people don't realize it, but some of those woods out there are toxic, and leaves and stuff. People want to start, experimenting with flavoring with different leaves, and like we've talked about before, even the juniper berries. There's certain types that you can use, and there's certain types that are toxic, and it may not necessarily kill you, but it make you sick as hell, and it could cause some organ damage. So be real careful when you decide that, hey, I'm going to decide, I wonder what these leaves would taste like, steeping with these leaves or trying to get a little bit of this flavor or that. Be real careful when you do the juniper berries. Make sure that you're getting it from the proper juniper tree. You really need to identify the tree, because some of the most common ones aren't good. So good to mention that, because that's it's one of those safety things. And red oak is fine, and French oak is fine, but it's they found that white's probably the best overall to use. And the red oak, you may or may not have hives, from drinking from it, but if I don't think it's going to be as beneficial to use. I know it probably be best if you could get it cut in some nice wood to build some furniture with, to be honest with you. Um, is it how old, I wonder, is it? Mine, I don't know. Mine's probably about couple of years. Mine's been that brick's been around a couple of years now. That's the longest I've ever kept the EC 1118. Yeah, Quebec is a very good. It's great for grains. Very good. Well, a lot of people love that. In fact, most everybody that's ever tried it, I don't know that I've ever heard somebody say that it sucked. I don't think I've ever heard anything bad about Quebec yeast. So what's going on, Anthony? Good to see you, brother. And I am 25 minutes behind. I apologize. I'm going to try to keep up and get caught up. Jar not far. I got you. I have a FAR of 1118. I did have to pause a bit at that. I'm like, FAR. Oh, yeah, he's jar. And I do the same thing. Yeah, EC 1118 is good for high sugar content too. Yeah, it's good for a lot of high proof. And a lot of sugar equates to a lot of proof, and it can handle the stresses of a high sugar fermentation better than a lot of the other ones can. And so with that 74, and with like for the meads and stuff, it can handle that honey well. But a lot of these yeast, a lot of people don't realize a lot of these yeasts, like some of these rum yeast, are designed to be used for, you know, molasses and stuff, and it'll have special yeast and enzymes in there that help break that molasses down a little bit further, and little invertase in there to help break them down and convert them, so you get a little drier, and you don't get uh, a sense of a stuck fermentation because of the unfermentables, right? Is the limit dextrins that are remaining in there because not all the sugars from the molasses are fermentable. So, some of these yeast, like the rum yeast, especially, we were talking about specific yeast suited for certain things. It's really good to do the research, like tequila. You definitely want to use the blue yeast. It's much better. And that's an opinion, but when you start talking about, you know, 80% of the people prefer it, 90% prefer it, only 5 or 10 think it's not as good, then, it's not necessarily fact, but most prefer, right? Uh, so some of these rum yeast and tequila yeast, they're going to be like that, where it's, you know, not necessarily a fact, but most people prefer it, and there's reasons that they do. And with the rum yeast, with the extra invites in there that helps convert some of those unfermentables and make them fermentable, so you can get a drier rum run. It definitely helps. Need the yeast for 30 degrees. Yeah, yeah. But some of the lager yeasts are good for the colder temperatures. So yeah, I don't think I've ever heard anybody say anything bad about Quebec yeast. Well, I mean, if after you mash it in, you can take the flocculants from the very bottom, John, and save them. And if you want to spread them out on a pan and let it evaporate, of course, what first thing you want to do is get distilled water and kind of rinse it and add a couple of gallons to it and just really water it down good. And that'll get rid of all the alcohol in there, right? It proofs all that alcohol that's in there down from, 10, 12%, whatever our mash was. It helps calm all that down. So that's not impacting your yeast. And so you get to separate that with some distilled water, keep it at the proper temperatures, and throw them a little food in there, throw them a little sugar in there to keep them happy and fed, and you could add a little yeast nutrients in there to help keep them alive and going. And just kind of rinse out the flocculant bed, and I guess the dead yeast in there helps feed the ones that are surviving. And you can just jar it up and make sure that you have some holes poked in it so it doesn't you know blow your jar, but keep it in the fridge and that'll keep it dormant. And for your next mash, just you can keep reusing it that way and just keep feeding it. And I think Alan Bishop has some really good videos on yeast propagation and storing your yeast, and he's got these what he uses a copper donna, which is an old method of keeping yeast. A lot of people use yeast grease in the industry. They use what's called a yeast brink, and they basically bring up a keg underneath their fermenters, and they'll hook up the fermenter to the keg. It's basically essentially like a beer keg. And they'll open up the valve out of the bottom. They'll drop that flocculant right into that keg, shut off the valve, and then they go into their secondary fermentation, right? So they get all that um, flocculants and all the yeast and everything out of the bottom, the yeast bed, and that way it helps flavor. That way you don't get too much of the yeast in your flavoring, and do somewhat of a secondary fermentation. This is mostly in brandy making, and they save that yeast, and from the yeast brinks, and they'll take it back. They'll rinse it and get out the alcohol and help you know the conditions and feed it a little bit, keep the temperature and everything right, and kind of stall its growth with refrigerating it, kind of make it go dormant, and just every once in a while feed it a little bit. But Alan's got some great videos, and I think Poppin Lines did some videos too. He started getting into yeast propagation and going out and finding wild yeast and trying to figure out which strains worked well. So there's some good content out there. Check out Alan Bishop and see some of the stuff he's done is um, pretty good, pretty interesting stuff. He's gone to a lot of old distilleries and collected yeast from them and brought it home and propagated it and cultivating it. You know, you can start with a little swab on a Q-tip, and from that grow it and populate it, and because they'll reproduce as long as you keep them happy and keep the oxygen in there, keep it an aerobic environment. They'll populate really well. But as it is, that environment, you got to also be kind of careful about bacteria and stuff. So you got to do it. Everything's got to be really, clean and sterile, or you can just get other wild yeast in there because yeast is basically everywhere. And if you don't treat it properly, you can kind of infect it with other stuff that you may not want. But yeah, it's a very interesting. But that's what a lot of people do with sour mashing. They bring it out, and take all the, siphon off all the alcohol, leave that mash in the bottom with that yeast bed and stuff and grains and everything sitting there on it. And then after they're done, dump some sugar with the back set back in on top of it and dump some water on that. And they stir that up. They've got all that yeast in there and all the nutrients from the dead yeast or what nutrients they used before. And really, with the grains, you don't need a lot, and they can just perpetually go it without having to pitch yeast again, which is another great thing about. And one of the economic driving forces behind the sour mash ever getting into being a thing is trying to, there was a lot, because if you're a distillery, you understand there's a lot of grain that goes out wasted. It's like, man, I hate getting rid of all that. So then they start, and it's expensive to try to, pay to dump it. So, they try to find pig farmers and everybody else to use it. And so a lot of industries like, well, how can we reuse those? And can we just use them again and again? And I guess that was the kind of the birth of sour mashing, is just a business decision that made economic sense, and they started working it, and some people love it. But it's a good business decision because there's a lot that those grains can give you still, without. I hate waste. That's one thing I don't like, a lot of waste, and kind of funny about that. What's going on, Matt? I'm sorry I'm behind, brother. Over a half hour. Man, it's bad. I have to check out Mangrove Jack. I've not used any of the Quebec yeast, but I'm definitely gonna try that. That'd probably be some of the stuff I get next. But I've been getting some of this Firm Solutions yeast going to be the next thing. That and the Yellow Label, I want to check both of those out. Yeah, there's I've heard people use cherry, successfully. Cherry wood, apple wood's another good one. But yeah, you definitely want to, do some research before you just start using any kind of wood in the wood pile. Definitely want to make sure you identify it, and B, that there's not some not just something that's toxic. Some of the tannins just might be a big no. I mean, it might be just not so good. All right, well, let me make sure. All right, Clint already got it. Need to get caught up. What's going on, Mash Brothers? Good to see you, brother. Yeah, I love me some red winter wheat, and I love wheated bourbon, and I use a lot of wheat. I like wheat and oats. Wheat for the sweet and oats for the feel, man. It's definitely something you definitely want to add to your fermentation if you like that kind of thing. Some people prefer the spicy rye and the sour, the sour mash is me. I'm more of a wheated bourbon kind of guy, and I like the oats as well for what they do, but I don't use a high percentage of oats. Yeah, it gets a little bit political. Um, sometimes when I get to drinking and it's late at night and somebody brings up something, I'll make a comment, but I try to keep on topic. I know a lot of people, and what you have to think about is not everybody believes the way you do. And that's what one of the problems with what's going on today is people, have trouble hearing different opinions and stuff. And I think a lot of people offer too much opinions and stuff, so it's kind of a double-edged sword. Uh, but I think people should be able to, sit down and have a peaceful conversation and air out their differences. Because I think when it boils down to it, I think most of us, if we can talk normally about things, I think most people agree on most things, just based on morality. Uh, and I won't touch much on it, but I think if we were able to just all sit down and hash it out and talk, I think most of us would agree on most things, but there are always going to be things we disagree on. And how we deal with those has changed a lot recently. I'll say that. A lot of people, um, you know, in the past, yeah, I can see your point, but this is the way I feel about it. And that'd be the end of that. Let's go drink a beer. We'll still be friends. Nowadays, it's like, you've got to agree with me or I'm unfriending you. This is getting crazy. So, but when you podcast and you do other things and you have a following, anytime you bring up politics or religion, you're always going to alienate people that think or feel differently than you do. So uh, a lot of people would be very benefited by learning. Sometimes that's not the best thing to talk about, and this is a moonshine podcast and distilling podcast and wine making, beer making podcast, and we get enough of that shit in every other social media thing we go to. So can we just have one thing where it's a forbidden topic, and I think that's a good thing for it to be. So, but I will apologize because sometimes I do get a little heated and drunk and you know say a few things I probably shouldn't. But I hope I don't offend anybody when I do. But there's certain things I feel pretty strongly about, and I guess a lot of people do when it comes to things like that. Good time having another drink. I won't say anything. Promise. But I was thinking about we were talking about doing a podcast just for that, just to get political and talk about politics and all that stuff, and it sounds great because you can get a great following by the people on one side or the other. And and the strange thing is you can talk about it and get a following from this side, but the second you disagree with whichever side it is, all of a sudden they hate you too, and both sides hate you, right? So it's best just not talk about it. That's right. And that's what happens, either side. Yeah, that's Marfugal Phil. He's a good guy. Oh, Phil's a great guy, man. He came to Maggie Valley. I got to meet him in person this year. Yeah, Phil's my buddy. He's a great guy. And he's a good person. Yeah, your yeast will last as long as you keep it properly. I mean, they're finding yeast in the polar caps that are hundreds of years old that are still technically viable. So yeah, they'll last a long, long time if they're kept properly, or if they're dormant. I agree, and that's I think that's where it becomes a moral. When we talk about decisions, and a moral thing shouldn't be left or right. We should all agree on most moral things, but we don't for some reason. And I would give some examples, but I know it'd piss somebody off, so I'm not going to say anything. But I tell you, some people, no, I'm not going to say it. But yeah, it is. It's morally, everybody should agree on certain things versus the other. But you know, I, yeah, most people are too hyper partisan these days. It's one way or the highway, and it's like they're all for this or that, and until you're not, and then it's like they'll dump you. It's like I said, if you don't agree with everything they say, either side, you know, they'll dump you. So eventually, you're going to piss both sides off if you have an opinion, and you're kind of in the middle. You're going to piss off both extremes, and then they just all hate you. That's the way it works out. So I try to just not talk about it. Now, 3 pounds is it's more. It's a lot, and it gets your gravity up there, and you can get more production with 3 pounds. 2.5 to 3 is what I generally try to use, especially if I'm using adjunct grains, which like wheat and barley and oats, um, which I normally do, then and it gets a little bit heavier than just. And if it's just corn, probably 2.25, 2.5, and it works out fine. But if I'm mixing other grains and I'm adding them later, malted especially and stuff like that, it's generally stuff that I'm adding to my 2.5 pounds of corn that I started out with, or 2.25 that I started out with. So that's in addition to that. So it ends up being closer to 3 once you add the percentages up, and that's how that works. But after you get that high temp in there, and it thins out, and you add the other grains at a cooler temperature as it's cooling down, it's a little easier to work with because it's hydrolyzed, and it's a lot thinner at that point in time. So when I say 3, it's generally 2.25, and I will alter it depending on how much of the adjunct grains or other grains I'm going to add. So that will change. But I usually start out with about 2.25, maybe 2.5 if I'm just going to add maybe some wheat, nothing else. But if I'm going to try to add some malt, I'll probably start a little less, because I'll add about 20% malt if I'm going to depend on the malt, right? Not use so much amylase. But I'll still use a pinch of amylase to help make it a little thinner and easier to work with when I steep. And so I don't do it all the same way every time. I'll just whatever whim strikes me. It all works out the same if you know how to do it right. If you're I always try to use a little bit of the powder because I've got the powder and I want to use it up. So I throw a little bit of powder in whether I need it or not, and I'll start with less high temp than I need because of that. I'm adding powder later. And if I do that, I'll start with a little bit less corn. But there's no right or wrong when it comes to recipes and how you do it. Just whatever you're going to add. If you're going to start adding more wheat, more oats, and doing barley, then I start with a little less corn. Using a liquor chicken for the first time. Now you talking about like how they distill the tequila by putting chickens in your pot? I've seen that before. I've seen them use turkeys and chickens both in tequila making and stuff. Um, I don't know if y'all watched the Moonshiners episode when Tim went down to Mexico, and he was working with people down there and showing how they distilled. One of those guys put I think it was a turkey in there, and there's a specific thing that they call that, and I can't remember what it's called, but there's a specific thing that they call that, and I can't remember what it is. But yeah, some of them definitely use Use the old chicken in there for sure. It's amazing. And turkeys. Yeah, something else. And I'm assuming that's what you're talking about. If not, let me know. Because if it's something different, I need to know. How's it? There we go. Yeah, that yeast. I think they found some in the polar caps and ice and stuff buried for hundreds of years. It's still viable, so it'll last a long time. There's bacteria, that lasts in that ice for a long time. That's one of the things I guess these scary zombie movies are about. Some of these bacteria and stuff that's kept uh, viable in some of these polar caps that thaws and comes to make us turn us into zombies and shit, right? Absolutely. Absolutely, brother. Yes, true sour mash. Yeah, he was on earlier. Yeah, I was on there with him for a while. I mean, I didn't get on the podcast with him, but I was listening and commenting before this one started. Yeah, Mark's my buddy. I like Mark. He's a good guy. Yeah, three. Yeah, that's it just depends. If I'm going to add other grains, I'm not going to do three. It's if I'm adding a lot of barley, and wheat, and I'm trying to, like I say, I'm going to try to utilize the endogenous enzymes from the barley itself that are endogenous, meaning from within the barley. Um, then I'll use less than the three because I'm going to do about 20%, right? If you want to do your 6 row or 2 row, maybe even a little bit more. But with the powder I like throw on it, I have to worry about it. But yeah, if I'm going to use barley and I want to get the utilization out of the natural enzymes, the endogenous enzymes from the barley, yeah, I'm going to start with about 2 1/4 because I'm going to be adding quite a bit of weight in that barley malt. So it depends. There's no set. It just depends on the other grains. Hey, brother, we're all here to help each other, man. We all talk about our successes and failures just the same, man. It's we've all had them, and that's one thing that I guess defines a lot of people. Some people tell you all about their successes, but when it comes to failures, they kind of get real quiet. I'll share my failures because that's how we learn. We learn from success and failures. Yeah, I like that. Shots and Tokes. That feels like a damn good show. I'd watch that. Shots and Tokes. Of course, I used to, well, been known to toke a little, but I can't do it online now. If you got the vape, stuff, I guess they can do that because, you know, it's a vape. They don't know whether it's got THC in it or it's just vape juice, right? Or if you're smoking a pipe, that's just a pipe. They don't know what's in it. But if you break out the bongs or the joints, then they get a little funny on Facebook and the YouTube about that. So yeah, we can't do that as much. I know there's some out there that do, but I don't want to get Philbilly, you know, shut down. I appreciate it. He's a sponsor. He puts this out there for us, gives us a platform to speak on, and so I have to. We're allowed to drink a little bit, and as long as we don't get crazy drunk and just bad, And when that happens, then they'll take action. And most of them are that way. But hell, like TikTok, you ain't smoke a cigarette on fucking TikTok, man. Fuck them. I don't fool with that shit. I don't want to get all political about that, but yeah, I mean, I enjoy watching some of the videos and stuff on the PC. I put that shit on my phone and it like must come on its own and shit. Nah, hell with that. It's hard to shut down. You almost have to turn the damn phone off to get it away. And it's like, nah, not for me, man. I mean, there's a lot of people on there that enjoy it. A lot of moonshiners on there that get a bunch of likes. And, if that's what you float your boat and likes and getting all those thumbs up and getting the following and, more power to you, man. Whatever floats your boat makes you happy. But I just said, I like the cozy situation we got here. Everybody can get on here and drink a little bit, talk a little bit, and share, some of our secrets and knowledge with each other, and help beginners and help make it safe for everybody. That's what I dig. That's what I like best. So, but there's something out there for everybody, right? And it'll get better, Pat, until like the fifth or sixth generation. Now, one thing I preached on this when it comes to sour mashing, take a little bit of your grains out each time, and like maybe 5 or 10%. 10% is a good number, and you don't have to cook a whole lot. And you don't have to convert it, but just take 10% out, whatever that amounts to. Put that on a pot and cook it fresh. Doesn't have to be converted and all that. Just add some fresh grains for flavor and throw that back into your sour mash each time. And that way, at the fifth, sixth, seventh generation, when it starts getting really weak, and you don't have to just restart it, that's what happens to a lot of people. They stretched out, keep going, and by the time it gets fixed, sixth, seventh, then they're like, man, it's starting to taste a little thin. I'm not getting that grain flavor anymore. It's just starting to taste like sugar shine, right? Or a thin mash. And so if you supplement and take out like 10% each time and just cook some and add it, hell, I don't even have to really cook it, just add it, for the flavor. But cooking it and gelatinizing it and just throwing it in there, just do that, and you can run it all summer long, and you'll never lose a bit of flavor. It'll be consistent, and really that's what we strive for, is getting something to where we like it, and then being able to replicate that, right, and get consistent with that. And that's where a lot of people have trouble because they don't document what they do, and they're like, well, damn it, oh, man, that's the best one I've ever had. What did I do? I forget, and so it's, yeah, to keep it going and going and going and be, perpetual. It's a good idea to supplement that way. Yeah, yeah, I like to gelatinize it first for sure. But if you're getting up to three, it's not a bad idea to throw some, high, a little bit of high temp in on it to help manage it, especially if you're using a paddle. The drill with it's a game changer. Used to with the old paddle, and the boat paddle or whatever you got in there. Yeah, that shit gets old pretty damn quick. When you start getting older. So throw a little bit in there early and thin it out. Works. It seems to be working pretty well for a lot of people. Okay, for your liquid now, it should say on there. If it doesn't, most all the high temp alpha is 185 degrees, 185 flat. Now your liquid glucose, and sometimes I think they get a little beta glucanase, and sometimes it's glucanase because I've seen 140, and then some is 100. So look on the label, and verify it. If not, call whoever you got it from. It should be on the label. If it's not, you might consider another source. There should be instructions on your label to what temperature that it should add. But on the glucose, I've seen it from 140, and then and some at 100. So I'm assuming maybe that glucose that they're calling glucose is basically beta glucanase, which is about 140. Seems about right. This is what we get out of a lot of our malts, and then just plain glucoamylase is a lower temp amylase that you generally add at a lower temperature. But there's a lot of different formulations and a lot of different sources of these amylase enzymes. So it's going to be pretty much dependent on the source and the type of amylase that it is. It's not all the same, and it wasn't sourced from the same natural sources. So always consult with the maker, and it should be on your label. If not, then call who you got it from and say, look, it's not giving me any instructions on what temperature. Almost all the alpha though is 185. High temp alpha is 185. But the glucose, if it's not written on there, I'd call the source and find out. Oh, it is your own. Am I that freaking far behind? Oh my God, man. I gotta accelerate here. Wow. I'm glad you're cutting young deer up. Man, I'm so far behind. I couldn't do this that Clint, man. Yeah, that's a thin mash. And amylase helps some of the conversion. There's nothing. Hey, brother, I did thin mash for probably 25, 30 years. So yeah, that looks about right as far as little, I did about 1.5 pounds of sugar, so mine would have been what, 7.5. So yeah, that's basically my recipe right there. But I didn't throw in any enzymes, but it does help. Back then, I didn't have access to them, and so I didn't use them. We couldn't even get malt there unless you malted your own, and it was corn if you did. Uh, yeah, that's fine. Perfect. 1080. That's fine, man. Okay, no problems with that at all. Makes good shine. It's a lot of people uh, will knock it, but that's pretty much a traditional moonshine recipe right there. That's how moonshine was made a lot back in the day. I know that's how I was making it in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and before the internet came on, and I got access to you know Amazon and a lot of shops. And I didn't grow up in it. There was no beer stores or brewery stores or anything like that in Eastern Kentucky. In the mountains where all this is made, and that's mountain moonshine out there, brother. There ain't a damn thing wrong with that. And it makes good liquor. And I tell you what, you want to use that same recipe, and next time put some cream corn in your thumper. You thank me for that after you do it. You just add a little bit more corn flavor to it. It's good. Now there's some all grain guys out there that turn their nose up. Oh, it's hot. Yeah, well, liquor's hot. Sometimes I like it sometimes when it's hot. But yeah, it's well, I made mine for a long, long time. Yeah, mine's about $300, to process one fully out. So um, and they do a good job, and that they do everything. That's the summer sausage, all the burger, all the steaks, plugged meat. Um, Kind of pricey, I know, but they do good work. Dextrose, Phil Billy. Phil Billy's the man for dextrose. They got a pretty good line on it up there. If you could drive up and get it without the shipping, definitely. So plan a trip around it. We're talking about putting a club up there, and when you do, just go up and get you a shitload. If you want some heirloom corn, he can make great deals, but shipping kills you. When you're shipping 50, 80, 100 pounds of stuff out, it shipping just kills you. So if you can make that drive, and it's worth the gas, because pretty much if you order enough, you can save enough in shipping that you're going to pay for the gas. You can, hang out with him, and definitely the way to go for sure. But if not, backup is there's a place called Restaurant Depot and Webstront. They have pretty good prices, but there again, shipping will kill you too. They got good deals on molasses as well, and so does Phil. But shipping kills you. So Amazon, free shipping, but it's a little bit more upfront. So it all works out. If you can get it, Phil Billy, you can make you a good deal, especially if you drive up there. You probably won't find it any cheaper. Yeah, man, I love it, and I love that. That's one of my biggest regrets if I was ever to have one. Yep, Clint. Yep, one and a half. That's me, bro. Love my grain mill though. That's one of my biggest regrets not getting that a long time ago. And yeah, that's what I've seen people use. A buddy of mine got a coffee grinder from an old coffee grinder from an A&P store. And it's red cast iron. Man, that thing works real well too. He cleaned it up real good, man, and pretty slick. That's a beautiful piece of equipment. A chiller. Yeah, it's a chiller. He gets them off Vever. You can get a Vever, and they rate them by horsepower, strangely enough. But yeah, they're chillers. Yeah, Clint was telling me about this Azure Standard. Has some pretty cheap shipping prices, but if you can drive up to Fairbillies, I don't know how far Dayton is from you, but for me, it's about a couple hour drive, about 2 hours 15 minutes. So 4 hour round trip. That's about a $30 tank of gas. $30 shipping on some of this stuff. That's if you're getting 100, 200 pounds or something, if you want to load up on, getting a few 100 pounds of it, damn sure worth your trip. Hell yeah, man, it is. I used that old Fleischmann's for many, many years. Made some damn good liquor with it. Using that thin mash recipe that fella was talking about. Yes, sir. Jason. Yeah, I like that recipe, man. That's I made that for many, many years. That Fleischmann's yeast. Yeah, dating. I mean, that's pretty much formulated for distilling. And it's a great grain yeast. So if you're doing grains, it's fine. A lot of people like different yeast, and one thing's for sure, yeast does matter, and what you use, and everybody has different taste. If we didn't, there would be only one shelf on the store. It's a store, right? They wouldn't have all these different things if everybody liked the same thing. But generally speaking, EC 1118 probably most all around used for everything, including wines and brandies and everything, and vodkas and gins. And if most people that buy one probably buy that. But if all you do is grains, dating, is can't beat. If you're gonna buy one yeast for all your grains and everything you do, you can't go wrong with Daity or Fleischmann's. Either one makes they do great if that's what you flavor like. But I definitely highly recommend to experiment a little bit. You can buy the little packets. You don't have to get the big brick. If you just want to experiment, get you a few packets of the other and try some other things. I highly recommend quite a few. If with your grains, try some Kveki yeast that everybody talking about. It's got a good flavor. Um, I've drank it. I've not used it yet, but I'm damn sure gonna use it. Um, this Firm Solutions. I'm not sure exactly what that 927 breaks down to. It may be a Quebec kind of base. I don't know, but this seems to be a lot. A lot of people like with their grains, and but it's good to experiment, and dating's great. If you like it, if you've experimented with others and you've always gone back to dating, definitely can't go wrong, man. Red Star dating is good stuff. And it's inexpensive. Now I never did any of my wines. So by the time I started getting into wines, I was already starting to, use different, this is post Amazon, and I was out of the dark ages, so to speak. And so I was already using some different, yeast, but they differently open my eyes, to um, what yeast tend to work better. So I never did use the bread yeast for wines and meads, but I imagine it works, pretty well. But it would definitely be a different flavor and flocculence. That a lot. It boils down to a lot with wine is the yeast bed, the bottom, and it's really weird, man, because some of your premium yeast, they're nothing in the bottom like you're used to seeing with grains, and some yeast you see a big huge grain bed at the bottom, or a yeast bed at the bottom with a lot of flocculence and stuff. And some of these wine yeasts and stuff, man, it's like there's not a lot, there's not a lot of flocculence at all, and it ferments slowly over a long period of time, and there's not that big huge bed, and it varies, so different yeasts work differently. It's interesting. But I think with some of the wine yeast, you tend to, I guess that's why they, do the secondary fermentation. After the first week or week and a half, you end that primary fermentation and you separate the rest of that wine from that yeast bed immediately as soon as possible, because you don't want to get too much of that flavor in the wine, or it gets overpowering, and it affects the flavor of the wine. You lose character, you lose depth, and it just starts to taste like yeast, you know, and you don't get as much character from the wine. So that's why they immediately separate that and do that secondary fermentation. And you get a little bit of carryover. You want some to carry over to help feed the yeast and carry it, forward. But you get rid of that bed so you don't have that wine sitting on that bed for an extended period of time. And then you just keep racking, and do a third rack, even after some builds up. But a lot of good yeast don't have a lot of buildup. Yeah, I wasn't sure if he was talking about chilling the wort or during the distilling. So I was thinking maybe he's talking about a chiller, but yeah, yeah, step mashing is good. And I've talked to a lot of beer makers, John, and they kind of go both routes with theirs. They'll step mash their adjunct grains together to build them up, right? From a cool on up, step it up. And then they'll cook their corn and bring that down. And when it gets to 150, where you'd normally stop your step up, and they bring that corn down. When they merge at that temperature, they add it all together, and that works well too. Yeah, I know what you meant. Right. And again, it all boils down to flavor, you know. Some people just like the daty, and they've tried a few different yeast, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with the daty. But when you start getting away from grains and start, making gins and vodkas and rums and tequilas and maybe even some multigrains, uh, sure, you want to try to maybe branch out and try some different yeasts and see what you like. But there's absolutely nothing, if you've tried other things and you just like the daty. I know people that's tried every damn yeast out there, and they go right back to Fleischmann's because that's what they like, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. I know commercial distilleries that use Fleischmann's. People, have trouble believing that, but there's decent whiskeys that are out there on the shelf that use Fleischmann's yeast, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's just according to what you like, what tastes. Right, and that's what I did for ages, Jason. There ain't nothing wrong with that at all, brother. That was the easy way, and that's one of the reasons it was done that way. We didn't have access to anything else. It was pretty much cornmeal and sugar and yeast, and that's and cracked corn. That's all we had access to. And it made some of the best moonshine I ever made. Now Clint's giving up my secrets. Yeah, yeah. Keep doing that, and definitely. Um, I will say though, Jason, after you do, that for a while and get used to it, I definitely want you to try doing an all grain converted, and then you can compare the flavor and see which, is it worth the extra money and time and effort? And for some people, it's not. It's just like, man, I went to all that extra trouble, and that's the only difference there is, or, and they just go back to thin mashing. And some people are like, wow, that's so much better, and it I don't have really the best palate to make those calls because a lot of people can take a drink of something and they get all these notes and flavors and all these things. And I mean, I taste whiskey. I don't taste a lot of those things. So I probably got COVID, taste buds or something. I don't know. I'm not really, I don't pick up on a lot of notes and stuff like a lot of people do. So I can taste certain things if it's overpowering, or if it's definitely there, I can. But I don't know. Sometimes I think people just make a lot of that shit up. But yeah, yeah, we'll walk you through conversion, and you can try the conversion and see what you think, and see, is it worth the extra time and trouble? And a lot of people find that it's a smoother drink, and it's going to be a smoother, um, and some consider it more flavorful. So I would say that's beyond opinion. It will be smoother and it will have more flavor, whether you like that flavor or not, or it whether or not it's worth the extra trouble and expense will be the determining factor. It will be a little bit smoother and it will be more flavorful, but a lot of people, that's where they have the trouble deciding is right. It is a little better, but man, it was so much easier my way, and do I want to go to that extra step? And some people will, and some people just won't find it worth the time. I got better shit to do with my time than that. So, nobody can tell you what's best and what's not other than you. We can, we'll help you either way. I I did that thin mash for ages, bro. And we talk about everything that you can drink. We'll talk about wine. We'll talk because wine's the precursor to brandy. So we don't just talk about moonshine. Moonshine is any untaxed liquor. So if it goes in a pot and it gets distilled, then it's called moonshine. Whether it's a brandy, whether it's a vodka, whether it's a gin, whether it's an absinthe, whether it's whiskey, bourbon, whatever, it's all dubbed under the moniker moonshine, right, Garth? So yeah, we'll talk about wine on here, and we'll talk about beer making, and if that bothers you, I'm sorry, but if you want to learn how to make good brandy, you start with a good wine, and that's the best way to arrive at a really good flavored brandy is to make a good wine and to use proper distilling techniques and infusion technology and get some flavor to carry forward and make a good brandy. So yeah, we'll talk a little bit about beer making and wine making and that that goes into distilling. So we talk about a little bit all about alcohol and all different forms. We sometimes we'll talk about how cultures do it in other places. So uh, we'll try to mix it up a little bit. We don't want to just all talk about you know we can sit and talk for I can talk for days about thin mash moonshine. That's all I made for a long time, but there's a lot more to it than that, and that's why we call it Distillers Chat instead of Moonshine Chat, right? Because we do a lot of different things here, brother. There's probably something in there that you might have some allergies, and reactions to. Kind of like I was talking about you probably said that about the time I was talking about red oak, actually. Uh, but yeah, there's some things in there you probably have some sensitivities to, and there's a lot of different herbs and spices that go into it. So it could be, definitely one of those. Maybe the anise. There's a lot of different herbs. Yeah, French oaks are good for aging. That's right. Yeah, we'll talk about it all, brother. We'll go from rums to vodkas to gins and absinthe. We'll mix it up. And I need to scroll on. Well, now, Garth, I'm sorry that you got all but hurt over that, but I enjoy making wine too. We make it all here, brother. You don't like wine? That's cool. Do you have a question about distilling or mashing in, or what do you like to distill or mash? What's your favorite, Garth? Contribute. Don't just complain. Contribute. Bring something forward, man. Tell us what you like. What do you want to talk about? Ask a question. Engage us. Yeah, yeah. You gotta make the little devils before you distill them out of the mash. You gotta get them going, bro. Well, so far you haven't contributed anything except negativity. That's all I've seen. So, if you've ever made any brandy, I guess you wouldn't mind talking about wine. You talk about running more shine than anybody. What kind of shine was it? Because I doubt you have. I've been doing it about 50 years, and Clint's doing about 40 something. So, really, you just bring a bunch of negativity, and there's no way to come into a group chat, bro. If this is someplace you want to hang and talk, and if you've got all this experience, we'd love for you to share some of it with us. Otherwise, you're just being a troll, bro, and you don't want to come into a place like that. But I think that's pretty much why you're here. And I didn't catch that sooner. I wish I had it, but he's probably not even listening now. But I don't know. People like that usually sit and lurk. And I apologize for being so far behind. It's Yeah, Mega Labs. That may be the Quebec. I've heard Clint talk about the Mega Labs quite a bit. That may be what I try to do. Now I don't know. Pick turbo. A lot of turbo yeast is fine, but I think a lot of turbo yeast was originally designed for fuel production, and they tend to use a bit. What makes it a turbo yeast is they include the yeast nutrients in with the yeast in the package, so it tends to ferment fast, and that's the general thing when it comes to fuel production. That's what they want. They want it, just like this. And they use corn to make the fuel because it's a lot cheaper than sugar. So that's another thing to consider is getting your sugars from corn. It's a lot cheaper than buying plain sugar. But they wanted it fast, and we found in the distillation and making wines and beers and distilling fast is not necessarily always best, but with grains, 3 to 5 days, they're done anyway, so it's not so bad. But yeah, I would definitely try to experiment with some different ones. Not saying that that particular turbo yeast that you're using is bad, but for the most part, most people that I've heard, I have, unlike Quebec yeast, which I don't think I've ever heard anybody say anything bad about it. I've heard, a lot of bad about turbo, and that's something I really never fooled with a lot. Turbo yeast when I was, I used the Fleischmann's forever, and then went to others, and by then I was reading the internet. A lot of I seen negative reviews about turbo, and that may be undeserved. There may be some really good turbo yeast out there for grains, but I definitely would experiment and try some different ones. Eggshells, yeah, that's a good source. That's calcium carbonate. You can also get that from oyster shells that you get from your tractor supply store and feed supply stores for chickens. And you can boil those down. It's all calcium carbonate, both same compound. So both work well. A little easier, if you're going to boil them. A lot of people bake them. They recommend baking them and getting them to a certain temperature. You may have to go a little hotter than just the 210 degrees or so boiling. But I've heard a lot of people that bake them when they use them in this um, for plants and for distilling. But the oyster shells, those work. They're the same compound, so those work pretty well too, and they're a little easier to get. It's not real expensive. It's like 12, $13 for a big 50-pound bag, and you don't use a lot of them, and you can reuse them, rinse and reuse. So, and I use them in planting, for my tomatoes as well when they start to, oh, I'm talking about tomatoes. Somebody get mad. I'm talking about gardening now. But yeah, I use them for my tomatoes when I start getting spots and need calcium. That's funny. People are funny, man. Yeah, yeah. Your lager and beer yeast are definitely cooler than a lot. But I will say, a lot of people don't realize it, but EC 1118 is the recommended temperature use is 68 to 72 degrees for EC 1118. So it is a little bit cooler yeast. It's technically it's Saccharomyces cerevisiae bayanus, which is it's a champagne yeast. So yeah, it's but it's used for a lot of things because of its tolerances. We can all disagree on some things, and we will when it comes to yeast. Some people say, "Oh hell no, that's the worst shit ever," and people are like, "Well, I like it. It makes pretty damn good stuff for me." So it all boils down to what you're used to, what you like, flavor wise. Am I going to tell you what candy you should eat? If you don't eat horehound candy, why the hell ain't you eating horehound candy or licorice? That's something some people love or hate. Licorice. You think everybody likes licorice? Hell no. I don't like it. I don't like any of that anise, any of that stuff. And that's why I had, absinthe and ouzo and a lot of these things with anise in it. Have them all, man. And I really don't like a heavy juniper gins either. I like more floral gins. Right. Yeah, I like weeded. And wait till you age it, man. You get that sweet along with some of that the tannins and that smoky and that bitter tannin with that sweet wheat and get some of that smokiness. Yes, sir. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's turbos out there that are good, but traditionally turbos were have too much nutrients in them, and nutrients is something they're finding, and I'm learning as we go too. I've been doing wines for a decade now, and I'm just now learning, how to step feed, some of my wines, and instead of giving it all to it at once, kind of giving it, a little bit over a longer period of time, and that supposedly helps build flavor and keep stress down so they don't get too much at once and get too active, and then, so it's all learning process. But yeah, and that the specific turbo you're using, probably not a turbo 8 or whatever that's very common. I'm sure it's a specific type, but I think a lot of people had negative reviews on a lot of the turbos because of the nutrients and being over nutrient. A lot of them were really designed for fuel and for quick production and not really, you know, delicate. But I'm sure that there's companies out there that have made similar products that maybe have cut back on the nutrients some and are geared towards other things other than fuel production. But as a result of the original turbo yeast and I think what it was originally designed for, what I've understood is basically ethanol production from corn to make gasohol and to use in producing an ethanol for fuel as opposed to drinking. So far behind, boys. I'm sorry. Garth, I'm so sorry. A lot of people make moonshine with EC1118. I guess Garth doesn't know what moonshine is. Moonshine is any untaxed liquor, period. In. Doesn't have to have corn in it. So I guess this is learning for you. Well, now we got another beer maker in here. It looks like, and that's interesting because I want to hear about some of these beer yeast. Now, definitely want to hear about some of the beer yeast because I'm interested in trying some like this 927 for my grains. I want to hear some of the yeast that a lot of beer makers prefer and why they prefer it, and will the preferences that it has in the beer making process, will that carry over in distillation to a whiskey? Because there's subtle notes that it's just like in wine. Oh my God, the forbidden word. Just like in wine making, beer making, what the yeast is even more important, right? Um, and I'm sorry, so sorry, Garth, that I'm talking about yeast again, but believe it or not, we use yeast to make a moonshine too. But your beer yeast and your wine yeast are so much more important in because you're drinking the mash basically, or the must, or the wash mash must. Um, so you're drinking it, right? So the subtleties that it gives you is much, much more important than something that gets distilled, because a lot of those subtleties get lost in the distillation process. So, um, I think the selection in yeast is much, much more important, especially in in the forbidden wine world and the beer making world, um, than gets, in the distillers, because I think a lot of times some of those flavors are lost. But a lot of people, they'll pick up on it, and it does make a difference even in post distillation. So it'll be interesting to see, what characteristics that you prefer, with something like this, Belgium yeast, wheat yeast. Um, yeah, it'd be interesting to see what how that carries over in distillation. Liquor politics, that's right. It's not moonshine. Moonshine is any illegal liquor, any untaxed thing that comes off your still. I don't care how you steep it, if it's gin or whatever, it's moonshine. So it has a high protein. Well, I'd love to try it. I mean, that sounds like it'd be pretty good for some other things. I mean, if it's got that might work pretty well with a grappa, because that I like that fruity. That's what the notes I get with the Premier Blanc. I get fruity, sweet, floral, and that sounds like what you're talking about here with this. Is I get the fruity, sweet, floral flavors from that Premier Blanc, the Red Star Premier Blanc, and that's what I use with grappa, my grappa moonshine. So I definitely would like to try some of that in my grappa. I'll have to make note of that because I like trying different yeast. Now I'm into my yeast kick. And I do want to learn. Now who makes this? And is this something? Let me look here. I'm gonna have to get on Amazon. Is this something I can find on Amazon? You're probably gonna laugh when I say that. Why in the hell am I looking at a fucking ceiling fan? Come on, man. Okay. No, I don't see it on here. See D47. All right. So I can't get it on Amazon. Fuck. All right, bro. You got to share source now if you're gonna leave us on like that. Now you can't just leave us hanging. Where can a man get some of that? Garth is such a happy person. Has nothing to contribute. Have you noticed that? Not a bit of knowledge or no counter with something constructive. It's just a troll. Probably never made moonshine a day in his life. He won't. He doesn't have enough knowledge to ask a question. That's right. You don't like it. It wasn't shitty till you came in here. We was all having a pretty good time. So, unless you can contribute, I mean, I'd love to hear some knowledge. That's what I'd like to hear. Just something come out of your mouth other than negativity, constructive, man. Help it make it better, make it great again, man. Come on. So, what was your thoughts, Pigman, on the Yellow Label Angel? Did did you just was it a corn or did you do multigrain? Because I've got some and I'm getting ready to cold mash with it, and I'm not going to cook or anything. So, what was your experience with it? I'm definitely interested in hearing that. And let's see, man, I'm so far behind. This is gonna have to go to 11 just so I can get caught up. Hello, Miss Lisa. Sounds good, brother. Now, have you ever malted wheat? That malting it gives it a little bit a unique flavor too. It sometimes comes across less grassy, so you got to try malting it and see what you think about that. No, Garth, actually, when I start my still, I bypass the thumper because I don't want heads and foreshots in my thumper because I use it also to infuse flavors. So that's my expression. It's something I came up with years ago. I would say that, yeah, I would crack it first to, I would say you'd get a lot more flavor absorption, a lot more smoke. Your stream's a lot better than mine. Oh my goodness. That's why I usually don't do a lot of kick because that's what we get on there. And obviously, if you have to come to other people's podcasts to get viewers, you probably suck. So there's that. Little Wanda. So is this a guy, a girl, or a little bit of both, or what? It's hard to say. But I'll make note of that so we can add Little Wanda to the band list on there. Something tells me Wanda was at one point in time in their life a Wand before they became a Wanda. But just don't look them. I'm sorry that I didn't catch those. I'm going to have to get Clint. You're going to start calling me when we get trolls on there that do that because I don't see that far ahead. Yeah, I've noticed the same. I usually don't do kick, but I did during the last night's podcast. We had somebody on there that was contributing okay from kick, and I thought was pretty interesting. And I thought maybe, if I put it on there again, that we could, get somebody there. But yeah, kick's generally a gaming platform, and there's a lot of IRL stuff and a lot of younger, stuff and a lot of mixed stuff. Mostly gaming and girls showing cleavage is kind of like Twitch. So, and IRL stuff that, it's all about attention and me. And really, if they're branching out to any podcast that they can find on there to bring viewers in, they must not be able to bring them in on their own, and pretty much says it all. They suck. But we'll be pretty sure to add her to the band list, her, him, it, they. I'm sure that's a they. Yeah. Limp wristed, limp wristed jelly fins. It. Uh, it is definitely just a winning time after reading some of that shit. It's always the Saturdays too that gets it, man. You don't really deal with a lot of this on Wednesday night. What's going on, Bud Grip? I hope you hung around long enough for me to say howdy, brother. I'm sorry I'm behind as usual. Ohio State game, all right. Well, I know we got some Michigan and some Ohio State fans in here, so man, that's a topic more sensitive than politics. If you're in Ohio or Michigan, man, you know those are some, those are some fighting words out there now. Yeah, a little bit. Well, now that right there alone tells me Garth don't know what the fuck he's talking about. If he says dextrose is as good as sucrose or better than sucrose is as good as dextrose, you don't know what the fuck you talking about, son. So right there, that's all I need to hear. You don't know. You probably couldn't even tell me what the molecule was made from unless you Googled it. So yeah, yeah. You don't know how to keep yeast happy because you never made wine before, son. And that's what we do. You know, Clint handles the easy, quick stuff, and actually, not he's handled most everything, but I'll pick certain ones and I'll give more in depth answers and you know go a little deeper into things and but you'll get an answer from both of us, but a lot longer winded one from me. But I like kind of going into you know and Clint's typing, so he has to kind of do the short answer things to get people answered that, and then I'll explain why he said, you know, what he said, because we pretty much are 100% in tune. There's only been like one or two things that we kind of different on slightly. We were along the same path, but might have been just a little bit different. But yeah, I mean, there's pretty much the once you learn and get to this point, you know, it's pretty much factual for the most part. There's some opinions when it comes to yeast and a few other things, but um, best practices and stuff, yeah, we pretty much totally in sync. Yeah, and I will say he'll probably tell you the same thing. Facebook Marketplace, you know, if you're close enough to him where you can go by, you know, he can hook you up, he can get you hooked up, and especially wood barrels and stuff for aging and stuff. But when it comes to you know, and if you're it's you can't ship those things really, you know, for what they cost. um, Facebook Marketplace if you're not close to him. If you're close enough to him, absolutely he can hook you up. Probably has some big stack of them. If not, he can get them. But you know, on the militia page, there's this the other day somebody's giving away totes. You know, so you know, stay on there and tune in every day and check it out. Yeah, because I wish I'd been a little closer to him. I'd been toted already. I'd have had me a tote or two. Yeah, yeah, Fleischmann's good stuff. But yeah, Facebook Marketplace, you know, for like 40, 50 gallon barrels, you know, 25, $35. You know, I drove to Louisville and picked up a stack for me and I wasn't realizing I was going to go just get a couple of them, but I realized that I could put one in the next one, the next one, the next one, get a stack of them. I'm like, well, damn, I can get more in that back seat of my car than I thought. You know, I thought I was coming home with a couple. I ended up coming home with 5 or 6 of them. So yeah, when you get the same kind, they just, you know, it's like Dixie cups, man. Stack them bitches. That's fact. That's fact. And I'd say before this show's over, we're gonna have to bid adieu. If Garth gets worse, we're gonna have to say bye because he's already proven he doesn't know what he's talking about. Because dextrose is and table sugar are miles away from each other as far as keeping yeast happy and flavor and yeah, dextrose is much better. It's a monosaccharide with just a glucose molecule, one single, which we know yeast love, whereas table sugar is a glucose and a fructose molecule bonded together with by a glycosidic bond there, Garth, something you probably never heard of before. But and yeast don't prefer those. So maybe you need to go back to the drawing board. And maybe you probably should go to the comedy club because at this point we're laughing at you. Yeah. So you become the joke of the night, Garth. Eventually, I'm gonna have fun with him first. I wish I'd have been able to do it as it happened, but that's okay. I'm sure that troll's still listening. Yeah, you can definitely do the EC11. Like I say, if you just buy one for everything, I'm telling you, EC1118. Now this is how it was graded, and this of course goes to opinion again. But here's average, above average, really good, and excellent. EC1118 was above the bar for most every one of the distillates, right? But it was never at the top of any. So it was good for most everything, but not best for anything, right? So there's probably specific yeast that you could get for any type of fermentation that would be better or preferred by more. When I say better, it just means statistically more people preferred it, right? And you could be that one out of 50 or something that didn't, but just statistically, most people preferred these over the others. But that's just it's still not a fact, right? So it's still based on opinion. But yeah, the blue under what most people opine is really the way to go with your tequila. Just like some of the rum yeast, it's they say this I can't what's the name of that? There's a specific type. Everybody's it's a common rum yeast, and they put specific enzymes in there for the molasses. And so, but yeah, EC1118, like I say, is if you had to buy one yeast for everything, that's it. That's if you put one yeast in your refrigerator, that's probably one of the better decisions that you could make. Fact. That is a fact because even based on opinions, it was above the bar, above the average bar for most every distillate out there. Yeah, he doesn't know. He thinks moonshine is just I guess corn liquor. I don't know. A lot of people seem to think that corn liquor was made because corn was the cheapest way to arrive at a sugar that a yeast could eat. And there's a lot of different ways to get sugars. So and if corn liquor is what everybody wanted, the liquor store would have one thing on the shelf. They wouldn't have a lot of different things. They wouldn't have wine there either at a liquor store. Yeah, he doesn't understand it. To make a brandy, he probably never made a brandy. To be honest, he's probably never distilled in his life. He's one of them Google distillers. Yeah, I guarantee you wouldn't. Well, it's funny that he mentioned comedy club because he is very funny. I was about to say something mean, but I won't. I was about to say something really mean. I can't do it. you'll probably think less of me, and I don't want to be that person, but it was pretty funny. I'm wanting to try some of this now, here, Billy. You gotta save me some, and you gotta put some in a barrel, or are you aging it on some oak or some spirals or something? Because it only gets better when you do that, brother. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, my guess is he misses out on a lot. And I'm also guessing he's probably single because nobody wants to be around negative people like that. And they are, I hate to say it, but he's probably a very lonely, bitter person. And, you know, he hadn't realized it. He's the victim of himself. Yes, there's all kinds in this world. Nothing better to do. But your time is done. I'm done talking about you. Hell yeah, and I start mine as then I like the apple. I started that out. It's going to definitely be a brandy, and it never had a chance of being a wine. But a lot of my brandies, I won't say all, but a lot of them, they'll start out as a wine. And I guess if you drink wine, you're not manly, right, Garth? Because real men only drink moonshine. He's one of those. Most posers are usually that way. Yeah, that's a fact, brother. That is a fact. And something, a very, very wise words, and something that few have been able to master, unfortunately. This day and time, fewer and fewer, bro. Oh, I said something wise, and it was fucking an hour ago. Half an hour ago. Now I don't really remember what it was. Damn, I should make note of that. Yeah, it's just it's generally people that there is a Santa haters club out there, right? There's a few people that, and I hate to say this, but a lot of it stems from jealousy and bitterness and unhappiness with themselves. And instead of making themselves better, they want to try to bring me down to their level. And I just want to allow it to happen. And I'm sure this is some account made by somebody that's trying to do it. I can probably give you a list of 5 or 6 people, and I guarantee it's in one of those. But I'm not going to be that paranoid of a person, and I'd have to give a fuck before I'd think that way. So you know, they ain't living rent free in this head, man. Because I don't mind, and they don't matter. It's a mind over matter kind of thing. That's right. For guidance and brotherhood, and to have a good time, man. Sit, discuss, and learn, and share our experiences. That's what it's all about, man. If that's wine or brandy or beer or whiskey and gin or whatever, that's what we're talking about. And unfortunately, Garth won't be with us after this show because definitely be banned. And so we're little Wanda that started out as little Juan and probably Juan before he became a little Juan. I guess he became a little Juan because he wasn't the big one. And I guess the duh came after he decided to be a they them, which, nothing against them people. Somebody, hey, I'm not judging anybody. Hey, you want to put on a blue dress like Bill Clinton, more power to you. I don't have a problem with that. Just don't expect me to drink wine or shine with you. it can sit a long time. It's better, it really depends. If it's in a hot place and it's open, the chances of bacteria and acetobacters getting in there are a lot greater. And acetobacters are something that are the origins of vinegar. And vinegar, these acetobacters live on alcohol like yeast live on sugar, right? So they will convert all the alcohol into vinegar. And after, so long a period of time, and oxygen, of course, lots of oxygen, lots of temperature, and lots of moisture, all three things contribute to bacterial buildup. And that's why we try to take away the oxygen with the airlocks. You don't have to worry about that with like a grain mash because 3 to 5 days you're ready to run. But if it's something that's going to be sitting around for a long time, probably be better if you did have at least something laying over top of it to keep the fruit flies and bugs out that carry the acetobacters in, right? So it's there. I wish there was a concrete answer, but it definitely depends on the environment. So, outside in the heat with lots of oxygen uncovered is definitely going to be a lot shorter time than covered with at least a towel, which would be shorter a period of time than something covered with some kind of plastic but not sealed where it can burp out right through like you don't wind it down or turn the top down on some of the barrels that you can twist on tops, or if you just set the top on and let it burp out but can keep all the critters out that way, works well. In the shade versus in the sun, it's going to have an impact. So it depends on the environment. But if you've got it in a airlocked chamber that's plastic, that's got an airlock, and you can keep the water into it years and years, like a wine. Now, its quality will degrade over time, but I've had some people say they had a grain mash in a barrel that sat in their barn. So that's in the shade at least, but got warm, and it was out there a year and they ran it and it was perfectly fine. It was just fine. I doubt, I'm going to say the forbidden word. I doubt a wine would do that well over that condition, but yeah, but something you're going to distill is probably going to be okay. Well, that's awesome, brother. Yeah, I mean, we can definitely help you. There's a lot to it, but we can definitely get you on your path. We can help you make some of the best liquor ever was. We can give you some how tos and some step by step instructions on making a good converted. If you want to go that route, I would highly recommend it uh, for a craft distilling. But yeah, we can get you there, brother. But first, you need to start reviewing the biggest thing. I will say this, Jason, and I don't want to discourage you or anything, but I would say the majority of the distilleries that fail don't fail because of the product quality. They fail because the lack of business ability. So I think that, when you open up a distillery, it goes beyond just making good liquor. You got to be a businessman too. And I think that's where most of them fall short is they learned the liquor end of it, but when it came to business, a lot of times they relied on somebody else, and therein lies another problem. I don't say you should have to micromanage everything, but I think that's where most people fail. I think a lot of people, and I've seen a lot of successful ones have a pretty shitty product too. So that was a lack of ability in distilling, but they were really good at business and promotion, and they did well and are doing well. And I would say that there's been some out there that have made the best product ever and failed, and it wasn't because of the product; it was just because of the inability to produce a business plan that worked and deal with the marketing and deal with um, the government, the regulations. There's so much more to it than just being able to make a good beer and whiskey, you know. So I don't want to discourage you, but learn the business end, talk to other distillers, and definitely focus on the distilling end. We can put you into making decent enough liquor to bottle up. That's a no brainer. Really, it's not that hard. But to make it work and market it properly, that takes work that most people don't have. You know, that's something that's hard to, you know, to teach. You know, I can teach how to make the best liquor in the world, but I can't market it and get people out there to buy it. You know, that's tough. You know, like I say, there's people out there with some of the best liquor ever and failed. And there's a lot of distilleries. You know, just check out the auction houses, man. There's distilleries failing left and right. You know, and it's a business. It's a tough business. It really is. It's tough. But you know, if you start grassroots and keep it small and focused, and you have enough uh, demand and you can supply the demand that you have, and it's good enough to keep you happy and financially sound, then I'd say it'd be a great plan. But sometimes people start too small, and sometimes people start too big. So you got to know your demographic, your market, and it's a lot of business. It's a lot of work. I don't. I do say I have in the past saved eggshells and used it in plants and stuff. But when it comes to calcium carbonate, I just use the oyster shells, and you can get those at Tractor, any feed supply store that has chicken food and other things that we deal with chicken. It's a supplement for a chicken's diet to keep their calcium up, and most places use it for also for gardening and stuff. It's great for your tomatoes. You know. Oh my God, we're talking about gardening again in the moonshine. This, I'm pretty sure this says Distilling 101, Distillers Chat Q&A. I don't see a moonshine in that title. Do you know? Because there's a difference between a moonshiner and a distiller. You know, I like getting into distilling because there's more to life than just. Well, I used to be a moonshiner making thin mash. That was all I made, and that was basically a moonshiner. That's all I ever made was that one thing. But I found out that moonshine is any untaxed liquor, so it is what it is. You do love liquors. It's the love or hate thing. I've never liked it since I was a kid, and it may kind of go to what we were talking about earlier with the uh, tolerances, and it could be something I'm mildly allergic to. So, but that the star anise and the licorice and all that, and the absinthe, a lot of people have sensitivities to the absinthe, like you know, and it may be, that anise. Yeah, I don't like them either. I'm getting 30 minutes by now. That's better than 50. Now, there's a lot of different sources of nutrient cave. Um, Diammonium phosphate or Fermax, Fermo. That's really the best nutrient ever, and you don't have to. What happens is a lot of times when you're buying the yeast mix with the nutrient, you're overpaying for it because it only takes just a touch. And one of the worst things you can do is use too much nutrients because it actually has the opposite effect. Instead of helping the yeast, you're helping them, but you're helping them to become more vigorous and stressed, and it just I don't know. It's the difference in a yeast just passively eating all day chill, and all laid back and happy and chill, versus feeding them full of steroids and them grinding and sweating and and that's basically what you're doing to the yeast. You're just pumping steroids into them when you feed them too much, and it creates all flavors, so they're sweating, and you don't want that. So, them yeast ain't happy when they're overfed like that. They get all fat and taste bad. Funny way of putting it. But yeah, you don't want to, definitely can overeat nutrient. And I think that's one of the biggest problems with turbo. Yeah, Tex. You want to go see Wanda? It's funny. I'm teasing, brother. Hello, Miss Tammy. I'm sorry I didn't say hey earlier. I'm only 30 minutes behind. Yeah, I've got a big old bag upstairs. That's what we do. I've got a big old bag of them up there. I'll grind them up so they fit in there better. But I generally use the eggshells for plants mostly, and I save because they do get the bacteria on them from the eggs, and you don't get it all rinsed off. But the it's calcium carbonate. It's the same thing as the oyster shells. So it's only like in the 40-pound bag you get, it's like 11, $12. So 13 maybe, depending on where you get it from. Tractor Supply, I think mine was 12.97, maybe something like that for a 40, 50-pound bag. So, and that's a year and a half old now, and they last a long time. Just like that Fermax and Fermo, those nutrients we're talking about, those last a long time because you're using very small amounts. So unless you're producing thousands of gallons, you're really not gonna, you buy a pound of that nutrient, it's gonna last you. It'll probably go bad on the shelf before you finish using it. Let's put it that way. And we calculated um, that I think the use is like 20 some cents per big, for like a 40, 50 gallon mash is like 20 some cents when you break it down to how much you're using to the cost of the pound. So yeah, it's pretty cheap. And it's well balanced. It's they did a lot of scientific study on what yeast need. Now there are some supplements, and that's one thing Fieldbilly was talking about doing at one time. I'm sure he still has that idea in his mind, and I think it was a really good idea, is to come up with a supplemental nutrient for for your fermentations, and that's to add some things that aren't necessarily in a Fermax or Fermo or Fermade, um, and there's a whole host of nutrients, biotins, and a lot of calcium, a lot of other things that you can add to that nutrient that would be great supplement to add with the Fermax and Fermo. See, I used to be, a lot of people talk about tomato paste and tomatoes being, a great nutrient. And I use tomatoes and tomato paste for my nutrients, and it's the best thing ever. I make my bird watchers. It's the best ever. It's not. But it does. And I was a big hater. I was a tomato hater. I hate to say it, but I was a tomato hater. Because I learned early that I did some research, and it doesn't have the fan and yan, the for yeast assimilable nitrogen yan, or free amino nitrogen fan, and it doesn't have nearly enough of that for a proper fermentation with yeast, right? So, and who wants tomatoes in their wine or beer and brandies, and it's just no. It might be fine for a vodka that you're going to distill at 190 proof and clean it up, but and that's fine for that. Probably would be good. But there are a lot of things that I did more research on it and found that there are some benefits to having the tomato in there, because there are certain compounds and things found in that tomato that are beneficial, but it just doesn't have the anaphan that the yeast really need, and that's the nitrogen, that's the growing power, right? That's really what feeds it. So it's like we can't live on vitamins alone, and if you're feeding your fermentation just the vitamins, we got to have the protein, we got to have the nitrogen, we got to have food. So you can't just live on vitamins, and that's basically what a tomato is to a fermentation. It's a vitamin. And yes, you can use vitamins, and some vitamins are beneficial. Just be sure to use vitamins that don't have iron. You know, iron is a big, huge no-no in fermentation of anything. Distillation, you don't want iron. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. None. The less, the better. That's why a lot of times you really need to check your water if you have problems with stuck fermentations and bad distillations and bad flavors. A lot of times it equates to boiling down to you had a lot of iron in your water. So if you're well water or something, oh, I use this stream water, it's the best. It's not the best if it has iron in it because it's horrible. But if you have yellowing on your sinks where you've had a drip or you get that orange, from repetitive drips on your sinks and stuff at home or in your tubs or whatever, then you probably in the back of the commode is a good place to see if you have it. If you get that yellowing and that orange coloration, you probably don't have real good water for making beer and whiskey and so uh, probably best to try to get around using that and finding a better source. Fine for showering in and cooking, but for ferments, no. Yeah, they make it really good. And this 927, what I got here, they got a lot of good yeast for sure. But the eggshells, yeah, and they're finding that's the best way to go, step feeding, and that's something I'm going to start doing with my wines, and definitely, definitely a new concept for me too. Well, in the last year or two, that's something I'm definitely doing now. Oh yeah, the eggs for gardening is for calcium. If you like your tomatoes, oh my God, we're talking about gardening again on a moonshine place. Oh, fall places. Um, but if you start getting spot rot spots, dark spots on your tomatoes, that means you need more calcium. And this is a great source for calcium. You can grind them up into a powder and just sprinkle it on your tomatoes on the surface. And as you water it, it goes in and helps tremendously. And you should start out with that in your soil to begin with. So mix in some with your yeast, not too much, but yeah, especially the powder at the bottom. That works pretty well because I don't like getting the powder in my in fermentations because it gets powdery enough, right? So I'm kind of just using the chunkier stuff for my ferments, and then the powder and stuff you can mix with some water or just add to your soil for your tomatoes. Again, with tomatoes, gardening. Yeah, time for another shot. It's Saturday, man. Freak come out on the Saturday nights, don't they? Shit, that's going in. Let's get something else to drink on soon. Run out of that. That's good stuff. Jeff, get low, buddy. Didn't see no Jeff Singleton on here, man. He must be busy doing something. I need to get up to him. He's got some things going on. I think he's getting ready to work in a distillery. They trying to court him into coming to work. He's a good liquor maker. He's a very good distiller. Great guy, great person. And I think he may already be working for him. But he impressed a lot of them with his liquor, and it, he's doing better than the one they had. Let's just put it that way. So they definitely want to get him. They do well. He makes good liquor, that's for sure. Especially his tequila, man. Oh my God, his the gold aged tequila. Jeff, hope you're listening, bro. Hope you're one of them 93% that listen to me afterwards. I ain't seen you on here in a while, but man, that aged tequila is dynamite, man. I've drank some top shelf tequila. That's as good or better than anything I've ever put on my lips. And I don't say it about a lot of things, but that man makes some of the best tequila you can drink. I think that's what he needs. That's his. I mean, it is corn liquor and his all grain liquor. That's a sour mash. It's a wheated Bloody Butcher. sour mash with some wheat. Um, really good. And the Bloody Butcher, it starts losing that earthy taste when you start doing the sour mashing. He's found makes some good stuff. Yep, that's right, brother. I just do it every time. Just 10% on your sour mash. Just cook up some corn, gelatinize it, and just dump it in there. It doesn't have to be converted or anything. It's just for flavor. And once you gelatinize it, you get all those sugars out, and that's it'll break down. It'll get used eventually. Especially if you throw a little bit of yellow in there, and have that working because that yellow label, if you get that introduced, that'd be interesting for your sour mashes. It would definitely help convert as it's in there, right? So as you're adding that 10%, use that yellow, little bit of. You don't have to be all yellow, just a little bit in there to help. You know, good idea, right? Little yellow label addition. Uh, See, Clint, when somebody trolls me, you're supposed to text me. Oh, we got trolls. Scroll down and get them out of here. Seriously, if that does happen in the future, because I get those messages and it beeps and I can check it and see. Okay, now I need that. Yep, they are cheap as dirt. Very inexpensive and great, and I boil mine and just put them in, cheesecloth and put a couple handfuls in a big old barrel, then, 40 gallons at a time or whatever. But a couple handfuls of big old cheesecloth pouch, just tighten a knot, throw it in there after you boil it. I like boiling it just so I can feel better about it. I like keeping them sterile, Um, and when they come out, you just rinse them out, let them dry, sit out on a paper towel, dry out, kind of shake them off every once in a while. You dry them on a bath towel, whatever, and use the same ones over and over again. And they just dissolve as they're needed. They won't lower pH immediately. It's not something that you want to. Oh my God, my pH has crashed. It's 3.1, and my yeast are gonna. No, it's not what it's for. It's not to dump in. It's just throw it in there at the same time you do your yeast, especially in your sugar stuff, right? If you're doing washes or you're doing the thin mashes, it's good for those because that's kind of a higher sugar. Uh, or your rums. It's great for your rums, meads, anything like that that has a lot of sugar that tends to work off pretty quickly, especially sugar shines. But yeah, it's great for those. But for like grains, grain generally doesn't have, pH crashing issues. It's done in 3 to 5 days. I think the grains help keep it pH neutral a little bit more. Not, you don't want neutral, but it doesn't get more acidic because even though it's working off vigorously in 3 to 5 days, I've never had issues with it crashing like sugar washes. And I think that has to do with yeast stress and maybe along with kind of the lines of nutrients. Just getting so much food and so much at once, it just kind of puts them in overdrive, right? And it's like that steroid, they get that yeast all wired up, all jacked up, they start stressing. But they're great for buffering, right? So as the pH slowly drops, it gets to a point and it starts dissolving the calcium carbonate, and then it kind of buffers it and it keeps it from getting lower. But if it does get low like that and you don't have them in there, the best thing you can use is pickling lime instead of baking soda. But if you have to use something, that's better than nothing, right? Because the yeast from pH getting into the twos, in the mid to high twos, that's going to give you a lot more off flavors than even, you know, using baking soda, which has some sodium in it, which yeast don't like either. Right. And I use the bottom of my bag for my tomatoes. Yep. Yep. Blossom, end raw, and spots, right? It's a calcium issue. Sure. Yeah, I grow a lot of tomatoes too, man. And peppers. I'd say those turbo, yeah, the DAP and stuff that's in those that last for a long time. Awesome, awesome. Honey shining a cigar, man. That's the life, ain't it? Yeah, yeah, brother. Yeah, yeah. That's what I do with mine. When I get it, I'll try to take everything off the bottom and get it out of there, and you know, check and use all that powder. I'll separate it, put it in a separate bag or a jar, and yeah, it works a lot better that way. Or I'll put it with some water. Doesn't dissolve with water very well, but over time it will, and I'll water with it. But it's best added to the soil when you plant, and if you get to the point mid-season, late season, where it's kind of dissipated, you didn't start with enough, just sprinkle it on top and water it with that water that has it in it. I found that takes care of my problem, especially when you get past that. You get a great production in the spring, and then you get that summer heat, and where it slows down on production. Then in fall, they start kicking back in. You start getting better flowers again. A lot of times when it gets to that point, I'll supplement it with some more. That's right. Even if it's freeze distillation, it's still moonshine. That's something blows me away, man. It's just you can't make a wine and freeze it and pull the oh my god, I said wine and pull the ice out of it, and then it becomes illegal. It's just crazy, man. Yeah, and that's like tequila yeast. You really need to know your yeast and what temperatures they prefer. Because it's like a tequila yeast. They like that warmer temperature too. Yeah, man. They can't do nothing but, man. That's all they know. Exactly. And what a way to come into a place with all that negativity. Hey, that's three of my prime go-tos, brother. I started out with Fleischmann's. I use Red Star and Lalvin predominantly now, but I'm branching out a little bit and trying some of the firm solutions in the Angel product, and definitely going to do some of the Mega Quebec yeast. Probably be my next purchase, actually, be some of that. Because I definitely want to compare flavors. And but I think that yellow label is going to be. I'm going to try it with I like my idea of doing it with sour mashing to help. How I talked about earlier about whether or not it converts. Just adding that gelatin, cook that corn that 10% up, because you can cook it in a small pot. You're only taking out 10%, so it's not that much. If it's even if it's 100 pounds of corn, you know, 10% is just 10 pounds. Which is you cook in a 10 quart stock pot, right? So, or steep in one, get it good and hot, boiling, and add that corn to it. So I think that that'd be a pretty good idea. Plus, technically you don't even have to gelatinize it, but I like the idea of doing that with the yellow label. So you could just You just throw cracked corn right in on top of it, right? Just let it do its thing. Probably take longer, but be interesting. Definitely be interesting experiment. Yeah, we get some trolls from YouTube. I would say Facebook has the over all the time. In the years I've been doing it, I think Lisa's right. I think most of them come from Kick and Twitch when we used to do Twitch too. I don't do that anymore. It's just too difficult. You have to enter in every podcast. You have to go through special steps, and it's like it. We're not getting that many people over from there anyway. So, but I did add Kick tonight. I hadn't been because I saw some. Damon had it on their show last night with prohibition and stuff, and I saw a person come over and Kick that was a good person, and seemed interesting and engaging, and I thought maybe they probably might see this and come over, and we might get another viewer and somebody that can contribute, unlike some people. But yeah, most I would say Facebook has, because people are less anonymous on Facebook, generally speaking. Now, there's a lot of fake accounts out there, but like that one, I'm sure is a fake account. That's not a real person, and it's a troll and probably a founding member of the Santa Haters Club. But yeah, Facebook probably the least. YouTube probably next, and then Kick and Twitch both just lots. I'd say enough where I don't use it very often, and now we know why. But it is what it is. I don't care. Yep, and I think that was originally all designed for rice. For making fermentations with rice, and they found that it also works well with grain. So. Awesome, awesome. Well, by the time I read this, it's probably in the tails now. 30 minutes ago. Right. Yeah, you definitely want to rinse your rice. And cooking too. Always, yeah, you definitely want to rinse your rice. Yep, yeast is a fungus as well. It is. But the goji has properties that are enzymatic properties and able to it's a fungus that's able to break down the sugars and consume them than typical Saccharomyces cerevisiae can, right? It's a typical yeast that we use. So it's a special kind of fungus and a special kind of yeast that can consume something beyond a simple sugar, which is a disaccharide or less. So it can eat what's called an oligosaccharide. Right. Yeah, it's just a different type of fungus. It's breaking down things that we would normally use enzymes to break down, and a lot of these enzymes um, are also kind of fungomatic, fungicides, or fungicidic, I guess. Fungi, fungi um, that help break down. But the goji can go beyond a disaccharide. The koji, yeah, that's different Mark Morgan. I want to sample too now. You make sure you leave him a little bit for me and put my name on it. You'll save it for me. I definitely will try it. Definitely want to try it. I love weeded whiskey, man. Yep, it is, Tammy. And it's almost quit time. I'm going to have to scroll. Damn, I'm a half hour still. Have to get through these. Tyler, um, one thing we can do is, are you on Facebook? If so, look up DIY Shine and Steel Building, and join that, and we can post all the info and everything that you need, and you can also ask questions there if it's not. Now remember, Tuesday or Saturday, because we're moving from Wednesday to Tuesday, so I probably hadn't said that enough tonight for everybody to remember, but yeah, we're moving to Tuesdays and Saturdays, so you can catch us here then. If not, Moonshine Militia on Facebook or DIY Shine and Steel Building on Facebook. And it's probably a little easier to get into DIY Shine and Steel Building now with the militia. Um, of course, if you're from this podcast, you're Jim. That from here, just tell them that you know you're joining from the podcast. You'd like to join, and then answer the questions, and you should be able to get in. If you have any trouble, let me know. I don't think I don't think it lets you post links. I wasn't aware of that until just not too long ago. Reading some of the changes that they've made to StreamYards, I wasn't aware that that it doesn't allow people to post links. But again, Mark's on the DIY Shine and Stuff page. Just anybody that wants to, if you got links to post, post them in there. It's fine. Especially if it's on topic. Now, if it gets off topic, you might get a little spam notice or something. But yeah, it does get tough, man. I had one of my best friends was a truck driver. He passed away this past year, and yeah, he had a couple of kids that he didn't get to watch grow up. Got to feed them somehow, though. I think they were happier with Daddy gone and a full belly than Daddy being home and them hungry. So, you know, man's got to do what you got to do. Can you? Oh, well, now, not all Twizzlers are licorice. Now, I've had some Twizzlers pretty good, but I just can't do the licorice thing, man. I tell you what, Tex, for me, these little oil field heaters, they're like the little radiator. This one's hotter. I'd pick it up, show you, but it's got like one, two, three, four, five, six little fins on them. They're oil filled, and they're pretty common. But those work really well, without getting, you know, I've seen people drop in the water, the fish tank heaters, and scorch some corn and ruin a good fermentation that way. And I've seen people go to the expense of using the belts and stuff. I've seen people use waterbed heaters and just set it on, wrap it around, and I've seen a lot of different ways. Um, but for my barrels, I mean, I've got like 40-gallon blue barrels, and I'll I'll set this in, and sometimes I use five, depending on what it is. If it's wine and stuff, a lot of times I'll just do it five at a time and put my little airlock in it. But if it's like a grain or something, I use the bigger barrels, and I just put this in between four of them, three of them, two of them, whatever. And every day go in there, and you don't have to, but I just turn them about 180 degrees every day so I can warm up one side, warm up the other side, and just keep rotating them, and it doesn't get too hot. You can put the thermometer in there and regulate it pretty well, and it helps keep the room warm as well. So but it's not as efficient. It does use a little bit more energy, and you will keep the whole room warm. If you just want to focus on, one thing, then the blankets or the wrap heaters or barrel heaters probably be a lot better if you don't want to heat the whole area. But I mean, I'm gonna have to heat the area anyway. Might as well, you know, just set them a little closer to the heater than anything else, and that's the way it works down here in the basement for me. You never had ouzo? It's like an anisette. There's um, there's a different distillate called an anisette. That's Oh, you do know what it is. You don't like it either. Yeah, it's like I don't like it. I thought you were saying question mark ouzo. Yeah, I don't like ouzo or anisette. It's a Greek thing, I think, originally. Yeah, I'm not a big licorice fan either. It is. It's best text for sure. And beer and wine making. Oh my God, yeah, it's best for most fermentations, but really for grain, I mean, they just go faster because um, they've been broken down with the glucoamylase into that single, molecule, that monosaccharide, and it's just so easily consumed, and it's stress-free constant, consumption, just like dextrose would be. I can't believe that they said it would be the same as table sugar. It is not at all, not at all the same. It doesn't take using it once or twice to realize that either, so that tells me that he hasn't. Okay. I assumed a gender there. Oh, that's funny. All right, I'm gonna try to fast scroll through here. Yeah, I'm not either at this point, brother. That honey sign is awful damn good. I, I had got some Toby's honey shine. Toby makes some damn good liquor. He's a good distiller too. He gave me some honey shine down there in Arkansas when I was down there, man. It's good. And Fibulate makes good honey shine. Both of them make damn good honey shine. Yeah, I think we're just cheap. I think that's what it is. We want top shelf. We just can't fucking afford it, right? So we just figure out a way to make it ourselves. That's my excuse. Yeah, you use brew bags. Cheesecloth is just something that it's easy to use and easy to clean and reuse, and you know I use a lot of cheesecloth for that. But yeah, you can use little brew bags or and tea bags. Yeah, yeast and bacteria, especially if it's something that had some fruit or grains and you get a little bacteria from that. You don't want that sitting on there and being out in the air, and open air. Um, so yeah, I rinse them off real well, and you can boil them after you use them, or before you get ready to use them, if you want to kill anything that's on there. If you have any concerns, it's always a good idea. 6 is good, and what we're finding out is hillbilly. It promotes the conversion to have a lower pH when you're converting, and just like when you invert sugar and you're converting a table sugar into or monosaccharides, that's why we invert sugar. You have to add the acid as kind of the catalyst. So it's the same process in converting these starches. That's slightly acidic helps catalyze that conversion. I wasn't aware of that. So it is for a long time, but I learned it that it's good to have that good, 5.3 to 6 starting pH, before you start doing any conversion, right? Or steeping. So a lot of people tend to pH right at the time when they're adding yeast. And if you can, try to pH that, naturally. If your water's naturally that low, that's great. If not, lemon juice, expensive. Citric acid, much cheaper. Um, just throw some citric acid in there to bring the pH down to, 5.5, 5.3. Doesn't have to be exact, right? I mean, it is if you're wanting to be commercial and exacting, and when you do that on a commercial scale, you do need to kind of get exacting for consistency. um, that way people from bottle to bottle, month to month, they're getting the same product and it doesn't vary, you know sure does, unless it's got a iron in it. I am Santa. And this is why we won't have kick anymore. And these are people about 20, sometimes in their late teens, gamers from Kick who really act like they're still in elementary school. Yeah, we won't be doing the Kick thing anymore, I guess. I think so too. Yeah. Yeah, I don't want to wait with the sour mash. I think it'd be a good idea. I'm trying to scroll through and get caught up, and that just stopped me in my tracks. In fact, let's just go ahead and remove Kick from the live stream. Yeah, no more Kick. Sorry for those. I guess they can't hear it, but if there's people watching on there, sorry, but you know, Clint, don't ask. You don't want to know. I'm sure it's somebody giving himself a Sprite enema or some shit like that. This is People are stupid. I mean, he can't help but fucking laugh, man. I mean, I mean, if it were the shit show, I mean, I'd probably welcome that kind of talk, but not for this. We're not here for that kind of laugh. But it is entertainment, and it's just not what I'm looking for. Yeah, I wouldn't. Yeah, I've seen people ruin a good mash. You know, I've seen the wah, and pull it out, and it's got the black corn kernels on it. It's not pretty, man. Oh my God, I got caught up that quick. Shit. I guess people quit talking as much. Yeah, and it's about that time, Cave Daddy. I got caught up just about the time to say goodnight. We actually ran over a little bit. We a lot of times we'll go 10. Hell, if we're having a good time, we'll go to 11 or a little after. Hell, I've been known to podcast till the morning after, as long as you'll sit here and drink with me. Shit, I podcast people come on the next morning. You still going? Hell yeah! My God, I'll be drunk as shit. What do you want to know, man? It's fun. That's back in the old days, man. We had a good time. All right, everybody. Thanks for stopping in. And don't forget Tuesdays and Saturdays now. So no more hump day, humpty hump stuff. But Tuesdays is cool. You know, it's either day, it's a 2 day break, a 3 day break in between. So if it was Wednesday, Thursday, Friday in between, and now that it's Tuesday, it's Saturday, Monday or Sunday, Monday in between. So, you know, it works out for me. I don't know. I know that you all have worked your schedules around it, right? Your whole life revolves around Wednesday night with me. So you're gonna have to tell your bosses, just gonna have to change the fucking schedules, right? Tuesday now is the Wednesday. So they're just gonna have to live with it, right? Just kidding. But just wanting everybody to remember we will be here Tuesdays instead of Wednesdays now, but it's all good. Yeah, I appreciate y'all. And I hope everybody has a great rest of your weekend. Hopefully Ohio State wins. And that's because I don't think they're playing Michigan, and I don't want to piss any of my Michigan buddies off. So uh, yeah, that's a contentious thing to talk about. But I guess I'll have to talk about Ohio football because Kentucky football damn sure ain't something you want to talk about now. But we got a new coach, so hopefully that'll improve UK. We got Louisville's old quarterback, so that'll be good. Will Stein. So welcome to the Bluegrass, brother. All right, y'all. Thanks for tuning in. Everybody, we'll see you all Tuesday night. Have a great weekend. And don't forget to hit that like button and share it with your buddies. And if you got some friends that want to get in the hobby, let us know. Bring them on, and we'll give them all the advice they need to make their own and have a good time. So, with that, I'm going to say peace out, shine on, and we'll see you Tuesday night at 8 Eastern.